Chapter 597. With his speed, saving his father from prison was as easy as buying a pizza, but he didn't want to use such a dishonorable method to get his father out of prison. Now that Thea had provided him with another method, although he knew that it wasn't fair, at least his father would be able to walk in front of people without having to hide all day. Barry, who had always valued relationships, was in a dilemma. Should he stick to justice or reunite with his father? Thea nodded. This kid had integrity. She just had to make a few calls and get him out. It was really easy to control the underworld and get someone out of prison. This matter would be done quietly, and Thea wouldn't be involved. Flash couldn't send his father back to prison when he saw him, right? He would most likely admit the truth when the time came. She was experienced in dealing with these arrogant heroes. Ignoring Barry's father, Thea still wanted to ask Reverse Lightning what their attitude was. "What are your plans for Reverse Lightning?" Caitlin continued to pretend to be invisible, while Saika and Barry looked conflicted. "First of all, kill? Impossible." Not to mention that they had been together for such a long time, they still had feelings for each other. Reverse Lightning couldn't kill them, so Barry and Cisco had to add the word update. They couldn't let him go either. Barry felt that this was his responsibility. He had to catch Reverse Lightning. "All right, I'll help you." Thea took out the Croydon compass and threw it to Barry. The Croydon compass. This is a magic tool. As long as you think of someone, the compass will automatically find the direction. It's safe and pollution-free. Ordinary people can use it. Thea explained how to use it. The two boys with high scientific knowledge seemed to have found a new toy. Cisco circled around Barry while Barry used the compass to correct the direction. The result was exactly the same. What's the theory behind this? Is it the effect of the magnet? Cisco, who was originally depressed, was attracted by the theory behind the compass. He became more energetic. Thea could only smile bitterly. Who the hell knew what was going on? This bunch of science-oriented people would try to use science to explain everything they encountered. The fat old man from Firestorm was like that, and so were Saika and Barry here. Although she had lent them the compass, Thea was still not optimistic about Barry's ability to find Reverse Lightning. This was mainly because Reverse Lightning knew him too well. He had been silently observing a person for 15 years. Perhaps Reverse Lightning knew how much Barry talked in his sleep and how many times he went to the toilet. The information was completely unequal. Chasing after him under this premise would only result in nothing. In fact, the best way to deal with Reverse Lightning was to let Madame Shangju divine his location. After that, a few heroes would go together and find this person. Then, a large number of speed-limiting spells would be thrown out. With a wave of skills from the heroes, Reverse Lightning would definitely die. However, judging from Barry's intention, he still wanted to investigate it himself. Thea didn't really want to see Shangdo now, mainly because their relationship was too awkward. In the past, it was just a simple relationship between an old senior and a new junior. Since old Ma and Shangju rolled together, they had become a friendly senior and junior relationship. Illegitimate daughter and stepmother. The two who were originally unrelated had this strange connection because of old Ma's involvement. How could such a chaotic situation be described with the word awkward? After saying goodbye to the three, Thea returned to Gotham and continued to act as Moira's election backdrop. Midway, she instructed her subordinates to use a roundabout relationship to release Barry's father. For the next few days, Barry was in a state of excitement. The breakthrough with heirs was not abandoned because of the timeline reset. His biological father was also rescued. At this time, Barry only felt that his life was full of happiness. Of course, the process was not smooth. Officer Eddie Swan, whose wife was stolen, was burning with jealousy and chased after Barry Allen. Knowing that he was in the wrong, he did not fight back and was solidly beaten up. Feeling all kinds of strange gazes around him, Officer Eddie Swan left the Central City Police Station and disappeared from everyone's sight. Lady Blackie finally confirmed her true love. She stuck to Barry every day. If it wasn't for the pursuit of Reverse Lightning, Barry felt that he would have forgotten his surname. He should have left the Central City. A few days later, Barry said to Thea on the phone. Thea could only maintain a limited amount of attention. To be honest, Reverse Lightning was not a traditional bad person. He had definitely killed people, whether it was Barry's mother or the original Dr. Wells. But to say that he was so bad that it was hard to remember, it was not so bad that it was hard to remember. From a certain point of view, because he led the birth of the Flash earlier, the technological level of human society had improved by a few years. For example, Psyker, who had been learning from him for many years, had received a lot of cutting-edge knowledge of future technology. His vision and perspective had greatly improved. In short, Reverse Lightning was definitely at fault, but his achievements should not be ignored. Thea's attitude towards him was to let him be. There were countless people on Earth who were worse than him. It did not matter if there was one more or one less. She was just the goddess of trade and wealth, not the goddess of law and justice. She would leave Barry to worry about Reverse Lightning. Moira's trip to the country won a lot of praise. Some of the media sincerely praised her, while some received benefits. There were some who praised her, and some who criticized her. Thea deliberately allowed some of the media to smear her family. Under the current democratic system, let alone Moira, even if Jehovah were to be the president, there would be people who would scold and praise him. This was the main theme, which was very American. Under this system, it was impossible for people to praise him and shout "Long live the Emperor." A few bold media outlets attacked Thea and other superheroes, while the timid ones began to use Oliver's gossip to hype things up. The writers of the media began to work hard. Like writing a novel, they wrote about Oliver's life experience before the shipwreck. 10,000 words a day, they wrote continuously for more than half a month. In Oliver's legend, the number of his female protagonists had exceeded the 30 mark. Every day, there were young girls who contacted the newspaper websites to introduce their stories with Oliver. Some of them were unscrupulous in order to become famous, while some were true. At least, Thea's investigation showed that among the 30 women, at least 22 had slept with Oliver. Many women described their experiences with Oliver vividly. They described the length, the depth, the position, the things they liked to say, and so on. This information was published by many unscrupulous media outlets. As a direct result, Shadow applied for annual leave to return to Purgatory Island to accompany her father. Even a gentle woman like her couldn't stand Oliver's past misdeeds. One could only imagine how much information the media had dug up. Chapter 598. Oliver, who had already turned over a new leaf, naturally could not watch his wife go back to her parents' home without doing anything. At the same time, he could also avoid the crazy media. He also prepared to go to Purgatory Island to avoid the limelight. The gossip was getting more and more widespread. Soon, someone dug up the story of Laurel Lance and Sarah Lance fighting for a man. If they were separated from each other and did not see each other, it would be easy. However, they saw each other every day, which was very awkward. Seeing that Oliver was going back to Purgatory Island to fish, Laurel and Tommy also planned to take a break for a few days. Old Ma had left all the overseas assets and real estate except for the Merlin Group to Tommy. This guy was also a hidden rich man. There were even a few small islands under his name. The two of them found a small island and prepared to go on vacation. At the same time, they could also avoid the troubles in America. The few of them had an awkward meeting and immediately decided that the Green Arrow team would stop work for a month. Before he left, Oliver handed the safety of Star City over to his sister. Moira's side had come to an end for the time being. The rest did not need Thea's help. She also took it as a vacation and prepared to stay in Star City for a few days. The young lady, who had returned to the novice village, was very comfortable. The four main generals of the Green Arrow team had gone on a journey together. The remaining Sarah Lance and Shadow El Gull had come out to take refuge because of Talia's tyranny. They were more like external aides, not team members. Then, the only one left was Roy Harper, who was now codenamed Arsenal. Facing the young lady now, Roy, the lover of Thea 1.0, was still very nervous. Thea simply gave them a collective vacation. With her personally overseeing things, nothing would happen in Star City. This period of time was a rare buffer period. The leather jacket man and the angry middle-aged man that she had harvested a while ago directly entered her new research range. Of the two, one could absorb Barry's energy and even all kinds of energy, while the other had anger in the emotional spectrum. The clone immediately failed. The angry middle-aged man could be cloned, but the emotional spectrum couldn't. The middle-aged man's clone didn't have any emotional power at all. No matter how scientific methods were used to recreate the scene of that day, or using spirit force to trigger the angry emotions, none of them succeeded. Thea had no choice but to slowly absorb the anger from the middle-aged man's body. Unlike fear and pity, she did not need to use her mind to experience anger. She was already a god, and with her own divine power, she could forcibly control anger. Of course, the downside was equally huge. His anger towards Thea was like a rootless tree. If he used it, it would be gone. If he used it again, he would have to find a middle-aged man to absorb it. Every now and then, she would take a breath and watch the anger in her spiritual world grow from the size of a strand of hair to the size of a finger. This process would be very slow, but it would accumulate. When she could control the anger as much as a lamp ring, she would have completely mastered the emotion of anger. The research of the man in the leather jacket had reached a stalemate. There was nothing wrong with this guy's clone. It was just that the upper limit of his absorption was fixed. This was determined by genes. Unless Thea resurrected the man in the leather jacket and raised him by 2 levels, the clone would always be at his level when he was alive. Whether this ability was strong or not, Thea would say it was very strong. It was just that the man in the leather jacket was congenitally deficient. Thea had tried many ways, but she couldn't increase the limit of the clone at all. The idea of creating an army of hundreds and thousands of clones floated in Thea's mind, but she immediately rejected it. 1 or 2 clones could remove their brain functions at the embryonic stage, but it couldn't be done if there were too many of them. Moral factors needed to be considered, and those invisible causes and effects also needed to be paid attention to. Mortals were afraid of fruit and bodhisattvas were afraid of causes. The more Thea knew now, the more careful she would be when doing things. She directly sealed the body of the man in the leather jacket. Thea was about to leave the laboratory when she saw the secretary come in. Facing the many unknown bloodstains in the laboratory, Miss Maisie wasn't surprised at all. It was just that she had seen the same scene too often by Luther's side. Although the new boss's orientation was a bit of a criticism, the previous boss's orientation was also very problematic. In the dead of the night, the secretary couldn't help but wonder if these geniuses were all sick. "What's the matter, Miss Maisie?" "Yes, boss. 3 minutes ago, someone took control of the Star City TV station. It's now live broadcasting." The secretary then handed Thea a tablet. She summoned a ball of water to wash her hands. After drinking some water, she took the tablet and looked at it. In the picture was a young woman, but her taste in clothes was very poor. She had light yellow hair and was wearing an orange jacket. Coupled with the big round black-rimmed glasses on her face, she looked very stupid. The woman, who didn't know that she was called stupid, was dancing with excitement. She shouted at the camera, "Quinn Group's idiots, you rejected the greatest invention in the world. You and your superhero boss are all idiots. Fart." Thea, who was drinking water, spat it out. It wasn't because she was scolded, but because she heard this woman's words. Was she related to her own group? She thought it was Star City's trouble, but she didn't expect that the other party's target seemed to be her. Without looking at the crazy woman on the screen, Thea asked the secretary, "Who is this guy?" The secretary was chosen by Luther. She was really capable. Now that she had the green light lamp ring, it was very easy for her to investigate anything. She had already collected the information. When she heard Thea's question, she directly answered, "This woman is called Brie Lavin. She graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in biomechanical engineering. She came to work at Quinn Group 3 years ago. She was a very smart and creative roboticist. She had once developed micro-robotic bees for agricultural use, but her pace was getting faster and faster. Before she was about to weaponize bees, Dr. Hoffman thought that her research was very dangerous and fired her." The secretary said with a calm face. Thea frowned slightly. She had a little impression of this woman. She seemed to be a very good scientist. But how could she be her employee? Shouldn't she be from Central City? She remembered that the Flash was almost stung to death by her mechanical bee. Thea was too lazy to think about it. It was not a big deal. Just deal with it. She teleported to the TV station with the secretary. The police and the guards of Quinn Group had already arrived at the scene, but the studio was firmly controlled by her bees. No one could use heavy weapons, so the situation was a bit of a stalemate for a while. Everyone was already used to her popping out of nowhere. "Dr. Quinn, what do you think about this?" the TV station owner said to her with a bitter face. "Mr. Pearl, please rest assured that I will deal with it. I will be responsible for all the losses of the TV station. You can send the list of losses to my secretary later." Chapter 599. After saying that, Sia sent the TV station owner to the side. Facing the dense swarm of bees, she was also a little scared. This was not to say that bees were scary, but it was instinctive to stay away from them. Looking at the bees all over the broadcast room, the floor, the ceiling, all kinds of wires, and all kinds of utility rooms, the constant buzzing made the secretary, who could defeat dozens of American soldiers with her bare hands, a little pale. She carefully looked at Thea's face and observed her expression for a while. She thought she understood the boss's plan. She waved her hand, and dozens of Quinn Group security personnel began to clear the area. "Use electromagnetic weapons." Thea glanced at the bees and ordered happily. The security personnel did not know that these bees were actually mechanical creatures. Although they were puzzled, they still changed their weapons. A person who looked like a captain threw an electromagnetic pulse bomb at the swarm of bees. An invisible wave swept across, and the bees fell to the ground. Thea suppressed her disgust and ordered everyone to attack. The following battle was boring. Without the bees, the woman was just an ordinary person. She was sent to the Star City police station by the security personnel. Thea asked Gideon to download all her experimental data. It seemed feasible to combine a large number of bees with the Jacket Man's cells. The surface of the mechanical bees was covered with bionic skin containing the Jacket Man's cells. In this way, the problem of limited energy absorption would be solved, and the moral problem would also be solved. Imagine a wave of bees when facing an enemy, and the enemy's mana would be depleted. What a magnificent scene that would be. However, Thea was a little allergic to bees, so she did not want to use this trick. She asked Gideon to work on the combination of the two. Thea did not use it herself, but others could use it. She was going to ask which fierce woman was not afraid of bees and teach her this trick. After staying in Star City for a week and defeating 2 gangs, Milady's current strength was like using an atomic bomb to kill chickens. Olivier went fishing, Tommy went swimming, Superman stayed at home with his wife, and the Flash and heirs were intimate every day. Since they all went on strike, Thea felt that she could not treat herself badly. She didn't have any conscience to blame her at all. She left an incarnation in Star City to put on an act and took Diana to travel with her in the name of improving her state of mind. Diana agreed wholeheartedly. Traveling was a good thing. She set 3 rules with her. No magic, no magic, no magic. The two of them had been busy for the past few years and rarely had time to relax. Thea needs to slowly adapt to her new identity, and Diana needs to grow up. Thea tells the secretary not to call her if there is nothing important, and takes Diana out for a stroll. The two of them carried a large backpack, a water bottle, a sun hat, outdoor equipment, and hiking shoes like ordinary people and began their pleasant journey. At first, Thea didn't think it was necessary to bring these things, but Diana insisted, so she could only agree. Thea can survive in the wild, but her ability is based on the convenience and speed of magic. Now Diana asks her not to use magic and to experience the hardships of ordinary people. Thea is exhausted. "Have we left the mountains?" Thea asked Sister Di with a gloomy face. The two of them crossed the Rocky Mountains on foot. At first, they followed a group of people. The two of them were wearing scarves and sunglasses, so no one recognized them. Soon after they entered the mountains, the group of backpackers left, leaving only the two of them to climb the mountains. Diana's ability to survive in the wild was very strong. Whether it was the previous 100 years of living alone or the recent journey to find the source, she was worthy of being a powerful warrior. Diana repeatedly said that she could not use magic, so Thea could only follow her on the long journey. Fortunately, she had a divine body. Otherwise, how could she drag an ordinary woman to climb the mountains with her? She was exhausted. Unfortunately, they met a black bear before. Sister Di stopped her idea of using lightning to barbecue the bear, so the two of them fled in the forest like ordinary people. The silly black bear didn't know how lucky it was. It chased the two of them for nearly a day. In the end, maybe it was wondering why the two of them were so strong, or maybe it was just too tired. Anyway, Thea and Diana found that it was gone. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. This bear was too persistent. Haha. Diana laughed as she clutched her stomach when she saw that Sia's face was as messy as a cat. What are you laughing about? You're not much better than me. Thea looked at Diana, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The Valkyrie also suppressed her strength. Otherwise, even 1,000 bears of that level would not be enough to kill them. In the process of being chased by the black bear, the long-legged goddess missed a step and fell into a ditch. Thea had to pull her out. The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Thea touched Diana's face with her fingers. There was a lot of dust on the Valkyrie's face. Her skin was very elastic and had a texture like silk. Diana Prince, has anyone ever told you that you're too beautiful? It's my honor to meet you. Why are you suddenly so serious? Diana was a little stunned. Then she saw Thea's sincere eyes, and she was also infected. You're the real beauty. Even Aphrodite can't compare to you. My lover is the most beautiful goddess in the world. At this moment, words were no longer effective. Everything was explained by actions. The two women's lips were close together. Diana's lips were thick and dark, while Thea's lips were thin and light. Their lips and teeth were touching, and their tongues were gently stirring. Thea didn't expect Diana to be so passionate. She was a little unprepared and couldn't help but swallow lightly. Diana caught her slight movement and her tongue suddenly opened her mouth, wantonly enjoying the tip of the goddess of wealth's tongue. Woo! Thea was annoyed. This Diana's personality was too strong. She always wanted to take the initiative. She wanted to tell her that she wasn't someone to be trifled with. While Diana was in a daze, she directly opened up a second battlefield. Her hand was originally behind her head, but now it went down and brushed against her slender neck. Her hot breath blew on the tip of her nose and the side of her face. At the same time, Thea's eyes were also electrifying. Her watery eyes disintegrated Diana's consciousness of resistance. Thea took advantage of the victory and pressed her lips together. She grabbed Diana's hands and put them behind her back. Just as Diana felt that something was wrong, Thea freed up a hand and pressed her down. The two women's indescribable bodies were tightly pressed together. The goddess of wealth was above, and the guardian goddess was below. When their eyes met, Thea sucked her trembling lower lip, then her upper lip, and finally the tip of her tongue went in between her lips. It was a short, deep, and thorough kiss. Chapter 600. The two girls couldn't compare, but they knew each other very well. Thea looked weak, but she had a strong heart that ordinary people didn't know. Diana was the opposite. Under her valiant appearance, she lacked love. In the exchange of body, spirit, and divinity, their attachment to each other was getting deeper and deeper. Diana was glad to have such a lover to accompany her forever. Thea also liked the Valkyrie to fill her inner world. The road ahead was too difficult, and it was too difficult to walk alone. Just like Batman's analysis on the note he gave to the Heaven's Eye Society, their weakness was each other. In the dead of night, there were roars of wild beasts in the forest, but neither of them took it seriously. Diana was in a good mood and didn't care about the promise that they couldn't use magic. Thea moved mountains and seas, pushed down a dense forest, and built a wooden house. The two of them chatted in the hot pool. You seem to have become bigger here. Also softer. Is it because of the divine position? Diana touched Thea's neck with a playful look. The young lady didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she had to admit that Diana's observation was very meticulous. She noticed such a small difference, but she couldn't tell why. She could only attribute it to the self-development of her charm. It's perfect. Diana, who had the essence of Greek aesthetics, couldn't resist this kind of beauty at all. She played with her like a toy for a long time. Diana's figure was also very good, but she was more inclined to be a warrior. Some parts of her body were not as beautiful as Thea's. How dare you tease me? Thea also didn't want to be outdone. Her hands began to touch her long legs, and all the way up. This time, the battle was more intense than before. Halfway through, Thea suddenly thought of finding a few pairs of silk stockings for Diana. Her long legs with black stockings really had a unique flavor. Diana also didn't let her go. Thea tried it on, and the coffee color suited her. The two pairs of long legs intertwined together, and the atmosphere in the wooden house was so thick that it was like water that couldn't be dissolved. After a night of intense fighting, Diana sat up very early the next day. My origin seems to have taken a big step forward. Valkyrie pulled up Thea, who was still pretending to be asleep. There was such a thing. This was the only thought left in Thea's mind. She used her heart to feel her own body. Her changes were not as obvious as Diana's. She only vaguely felt that she was more in tune with the universe. Of course, this was not caused by a night of lovemaking, but by some kind of change in the state of mind. The two of them immediately packed up and continued their journey. From the United States all the way south, through Mexico, into South America. As an American country, the difference between here and the north was like heaven and earth. Thea felt that the trade here was chaotic and disorderly. The distribution of wealth was even more unreasonable. Money was only in the hands of a few people. Naturally, the ordinary people did not need to trade. She even saw bartering in a certain area, which made her very unhappy. Diana didn't like this place either. Who was she supposed to protect? Protect the rich and powerful, or protect the equally cunning civilians? The two's journey lasted for more than half a month. Diana received a message from Hippolyte, asking her to return to Mount Olympus. Fearing that she would have an accident, Thea decided to go with her. The two women were teleported to Mount Olympus. At this time, it had been 9 months since Thea left last time. The originally solemn and majestic mountain peak was shrouded in a murderous aura. Many Amazons were busy preparing. The time of the prophecy has come. The eldest son of Zeus is about to kill his brothers and sisters and ascend to his father's throne. Hera pointed to the people who were preparing for the battle and explained to the two women. Now she could no longer see through Thea's depth. Her attitude naturally changed again. She went from being optimistic to being an equal, even if she was a god king. This was the difference in strength. You should try to avoid fighting as much as possible, especially in the battle of gods. The priesthood of the old gods will affect your origin. Thea told Diana. The eldest son was praised as a god in the prophecy. She was afraid that Diana would rush up regardless of everything. Although the gods were unwilling, in the face of the summons of the god king, except for the rebellious Apollo and Hermes who had defected to Hades, several other gods who were still breathing also arrived one by one. A bunch of weaklings. Thea was not optimistic about the combat power of the gods of wine, fire, agriculture, and strife. They were good at eating, drinking, and playing, but fighting? They had to stand aside. The old acquaintance, Ars, was getting older and older. He stood there trembling. Many Amazons didn't understand why this bad guy in the past seemed like he could be blown away by a breath. Thea knew very well that although the weakening of the god of war had nothing to do with her directly, the indirect impact was too great. There was no war between humans. It was ironic that several big countries were forced into the fast lane by her interstellar plan. They were all desperately building mecha and motherships. A few gunpowder barrels, the Middle East, Afghanistan, and so on. Without a few big countries secretly playing games, why would they fight among themselves? All the wars subsided a month after the mothership was launched. The big countries had no energy to play games. They were all digging deep into their potential to occupy a leadership position in the future. The end of the war naturally affected ours. 100 years ago, he pretended to be a cripple in front of Thea, Diana, and Steve. Now, he didn't need to pretend. He was already crippled. He was a candle in the wind. In the next few days, the gods waited for the enemy to attack in Olympus. The fighting power of the god of wine was not worth mentioning, but the wine he brewed was simply the best in the world. Thea and he chatted well. She brought a lot of good wine and was going to let Moira, Oliver, and the others taste it. The god of fire had been helping the gods to build weapons. Thea discussed with him twice, and he agreed to build a weapon for Diana. The god slayer that he had obtained from Paradise Island, Sia had jokingly called it the sword that ours must die. This sword had already completed its historical mission. Ars did not need anyone else to do anything as he was about to die. Now, it was just the right time to take it out and reforge it with Diana's Vulcan's sword. These two swords were built by the god of fire. Now that the two swords were back in his hands, he couldn't help but sigh. After asking Diana about her fighting habits, the two swords were returned to the furnace to be forged. 3 days later, a pair of blue swords was handed to Diana. 2 swords, this was her fighting style in the future. The combination of sword and shield was no longer suitable for Diana's increasing strength. Low-level enemies couldn't break her defense, so she didn't need the shield. High-level enemies couldn't defend her with the shield. Instead of being awkward, it was better to give up the shield and strengthen her attack power. With golden armor and a red cloak, and 2 long swords in her hands, Diana now looked more heroic. Thea had a different style. It was not suitable to wear the old gods' equipment in the territory of the new gods, but it was okay to wear the new gods' equipment in the territory of the old gods. At least, Hera and the others couldn't see the origin of Thea's divine robe. They just thought it was very mysterious. Chapter 601. Diana gave people the impression of a brave warrior, while Thea embodied the mystery of a spellcaster. The hood covered most of her face, and her beautiful chin, slightly opened lips, and the occasional strand of golden hair peeking out from the hood were filled with a tranquil aura. The gods waited for 10 days, and the enemies in the prophecy finally appeared. Mount Olympus, which was covered in starlight, seemed to have been hit by something, and a deep crater suddenly appeared on the empty ground. Countless evil creatures descended upon the land of the gods. The leader was a tall and strong man with a fierce face and an open chest full of scars. His hair and beard were like weeds, and his equipment was very simple, as if he had stripped off the skin of some animal and put it on his body. However, no one would underestimate this leather outfit. This was dragon skin, the skin of an adult black dragon. It was barbaric, coarse, and violent. Even from thousands of miles away, one could still feel the bone-deep hatred from this person. He hated this place, hated everyone here. He was a nameless god, the eldest son of Zeus and Hera. When he was born, he was abandoned by his biological parents because of the prophecy that he would sit on the throne of the gods. He grew up in the wilderness and fought with wolves during his childhood. When he became an adult, he tried to prove his worth to Mount Olympus, killing evil dragons and fighting everywhere. Unfortunately, his bravery was not valued. Instead, it aroused fear. Zeus personally took action and sealed him in the depths of the earth's core. With hatred for Mount Olympus and the whole world, he climbed with his bare hands for 6,000 years. After countless hardships, he finally saw the light of day again. He wanted revenge and to take back what belonged to him. He was the eldest son. The appearance of the evil creatures naturally attracted the attention of the gods. At this time, Thea was chatting with her new friend. It was Aramani, who had the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a spider. She had followed Thea out when Hera was wreaking havoc in the underworld. She was also at the level of a demigod and was one of the few important combat forces under Hera's command. Thea happened to pass by and saw her spinning silk at the same time, which attracted her interest. After that, they started chatting casually. Even though Sia was now in the camp of the Greek gods, she still felt that these gods were quite ked up. Back when Aramani was a mortal, she was the wife of a king. Her hobby was weaving, which was completely harmless to humans and animals. Not only that, it also had a very positive effect on ordinary women. Men would farm and go to war, while women would weave. Logically speaking, such a harmonious and positive scene should be a good thing. Unfortunately, the goddess Athena heard of her good weaving skills, and Athena, who had nothing better to do, personally descended to the mortal world to compete with her. Naturally, ordinary people couldn't compare to the gods who had cheats, and Aramani couldn't take it anymore and committed suicide. If things stopped here, it would already be too much, but the worst was yet to come. For some unknown reason, Athena captured her soul and reincarnated her into a half-human, half-spider. How could such a vile thing be described with the word F***ck? Do whatever you want, submit to me and prosper, oppose me and perish. Even if you die, you have to carry shame with you. This was the thinking of the gods at that time. After listening to the outrageous story, Thea couldn't help but look askance. Others were afraid of Athena, but she didn't have to. Athena wouldn't send a group of Saint Seiras to push her, so what was there to be afraid of? She stood in Aramani's position and scolded Athena. Only then did the Spider-Woman and her have a little friendship. Over the next few days, Thea chatted with her every now and then. The two of them could barely be considered friends, and Thea made her request. She wanted to use her divine spider silk to weave stockings. She wanted a variety of colors so that she could spar with the long-legged goddess in the future. Ordinary people's stockings were too easy to wear and tear. Only quasi-divine items could match them. The Spider-Woman, who didn't understand her evil intentions, was puzzled. What was the purpose of weaving stockings with spider silk that was as thin as a cicada's wing? Was it for defense or to increase one's speed? Although she couldn't figure out the purpose, Aramani, who could spit spider silk and had max-level tailoring skills, made a few pairs of stockings according to her request even though she had turned into a spider. Aramani, who felt like she had found a treasure, returned the favor and helped the Spider-Woman check it. Athena's technique wasn't brilliant. Originally, Thea could have helped her return to her original form, but unfortunately, her spider form had been completely fixed during the process of her returning from the underworld to the world of the living. Even with Thea's ability, she couldn't change this situation. She could only take a step back and cast a permanent human transformation spell on the Spider-Woman. This spell allowed her to maintain her human form for 4 hours a day. This simple effort gained the Spider-Woman's strong goodwill. In the end, Thea received a large number of silk products and said that if she needed more, she would have more in the future. When the firstborn arrived, she and the Spider-Woman were researching how to make new underwear. Since the stockings had been changed, they might as well upgrade the underwear too. Both of them were unhappy that their research was interrupted. Thea brought Aramani a lot of information about the development of clothing on modern Earth, which made the Spider-Woman feel like she had found a treasure. Although the aesthetic of ancient Greece was different from that of modern times, it was still very useful. Thea also told the Spider-Woman her favorite style of clothing and asked her to make a few sets according to it. Unfortunately, the enemy had come, so the two could only stop their research and run outside to do the fighting. When they arrived outside, the enemy army had already begun to form up. The main force was the wild wolves that had raised the firstborn. Because they had been contaminated with a lot of divinity, some of the wild wolves had already shown signs of walking upright. Most of the rest were ghost wolves. These animals had already reached the end of their lives, but because of the influence of the firstborn's divinity, they were still lingering on the border of life and death. Now, they had all been recruited by the firstborn to fight. In addition, there were many ghost creatures in different shapes and sizes. Some were humans, some were beasts, and some were strangely shaped like humans and beasts. The gods reckoned that these creatures were the cannon fodder that the firstborn had recruited. Their role was to consume the magic power of the gods. Compared to the organized army of the Amazons on Mount Olympus, the army of the firstborn could be said to be endless. These cannon fodder were valuable as long as they could contain one god. The evil army began to march toward Mount Olympus in silence, as if dark clouds were pressing down on the city. "What do you think?" Diana whispered to Thea. She was referring to the firstborn. It was similar to how the Heavenly Father dealt with Darkseid. In a battle of this level, the battle between small soldiers would not affect the overall situation at all. As long as the firstborn could be dealt with, the ghost creatures would not be of any help. Thea looked a little serious. The strength of the firstborn was not a bluff. Just looking at its powerful and murderous appearance, she was not very confident. Chapter 602. It was a battle of revenge, a battle to the death, not to mention true divine power. Thea could not compare with the other party in terms of momentum. The other party had suppressed his anger for thousands of years, and it was said that it took him 6,000 years to climb back to the ground from the core of the earth. A minute ago, Hera was still discussing the issue of stockings and underwear, and the other party came at her. Unless there was a crushing difference in strength, it would be strange if she could defeat him. It was not the same style at all. And she was the goddess of trade and wealth, which had nothing to do with fighting. And this firstborn was similar to Hercules. They were both old gods who had escaped the twilight of the gods and were in relatively good condition. No one knew what his specific clergy was, but in Thea's view, it was very similar to fighting and revenge. Diana asked again when she didn't answer for a long time. Sia saw that she was eager to try, and she complained in her heart. Between her and the firstborn, who was stronger and who was weaker, she needed to really fight, but Diana was definitely a little weaker, and this was the critical moment of her fusion of the source, so it was better not to fight. For her wife, the goddess of trade and wealth could only fight the firstborn of Zeus. Far worse than me, Thea whispered to Diana, and also pretended to be arrogant as if the enemy was not in her eyes. No, I think he's quite strong. Diana had not seriously fought with Thea for a while. She really did not know the true strength of Thea after she became a god. Seeing her firmly guarantee, she slowly relaxed. The huge ghost army seemed to be moving slowly, but in fact, it was moving quickly towards Mount Olympus, and an invisible pressure began to envelop everyone's heads. Antiope, who replaced Hippolyte, was commanding the Amazons to set up a line of defense. Bundles of magic arrows, many enchanted swords, shields, and armors were sent to each warrior. The Amazons were the most elite warriors of this era, and Hera was not stingy with them. She opened the treasury of Mount Olympus and took out many precious equipment from ancient times. Unlike Hippolyte, Antiope was a pure warrior. She knew that the Amazons did not have the advantage in numbers, so she directly set up 3 lines of defense on the periphery and prepared a group of cavalry for mobility. The advantage of the firstborn's army was their numbers. There were endless ghosts and beasts, and the ratio of their numbers to the Amazons was almost 100 to 1. It was his idea to use quantity to fight quality. That was why he dared to come to Mount Olympus with his massive army and his own martial arts prowess. The advantage of the Greek gods was that they had a large number of gods. Even the most useless gods were more powerful than the monsters and beasts. They could defeat a large number of them with a wave of their hands. The only weakness was that they were forcibly conscripted by Hera. They could fight a favorable battle, but it was impossible to expect them to risk their lives against the firstborn. The depressing atmosphere lasted for an hour. All the gods came to the mountain peak to watch. A few of them were exchanging glances. The prophecy had clearly stated that the eldest son of Zeus would kill his brother and eventually ascend to the throne. The gods on the mountain were all in line with the prophecy. Each of them had their own plans. The firstborn came with thousands of years of hatred. No one could ignore its powerful power. They did not want to be the first to stand out. Zeus, Hera, according to the prophecy, I want to take back everything that is mine. The firstborn, who was 3 meters tall and was wearing a dragonskin cloak, strode out and roared at Mount Olympus. Following his words, the spirits and beasts also roared at the sky. The hatred contained in their roars made the gods take a step back involuntarily. Hera looked a little sad. She was not in a good mood to fight with her own son. But seeing that both sides were waiting for her reply, she reluctantly stood up. Child, I am your mother. I don't want to do this. It was Zeus' idea to abandon you. Seeing his mother, the firstborn was still a little silent. Hera continued, the prophecy is a farce. I am willing to correct this mistake. We are still a family. Child, are you willing to give me this opportunity? Before the firstborn could reply, a woman came out from behind his majestic figure. Brother, don't listen to Hera's lies. She is afraid that you will take away her position as the king of gods. What a joke. A female king of gods. What a stupid woman. The woman looked gentle and beautiful. There was a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. She wore a silk robe and walked barefoot on the ground. Her voice was very soft, but every god, every female warrior, and many monsters on the battlefield heard it clearly. It was as if someone was whispering in their ear. An invisible energy soothed the firstborn's heartstrings. His eyes were filled with hatred again. Who is this? Thea joined the battle purely as a family member of Diana. She did not know the woman beside the firstborn. To be honest, when the two first fell in love, she spent a period of time studying Greek mythology to increase their common language. But later, she found that there were too many nonsensical stories in it. So, she chose to abandon the book. She basically knew the famous ones, but she had to apologize to the less famous ones. Princess of Troy, daughter of Zeus. Cassandra, the old acquaintance Ars, was standing beside the two women. When he heard Thea's question, he answered casually. Looking at the old man who was out of breath, Thea was afraid that he would die at her feet. She smiled bitterly to show that she heard it. This guy has the power of speech, but he is only a demigod. The goddess of strife, Eris, stood on the other side of the two women. When humans stopped the war, she also suffered a lot. Her smooth skin showed signs of dehydration. She provoked everyone to fight. Eris's power also came from words. Cassandra's speech and her priesthood had something in common. That was why she was unhappy. Queen Hera, if you don't want blood to flow like a river in Mount Olympus, please get out of the way. Today is the moment when the prophecy comes true. Your firstborn will eventually ascend the throne of the King of Gods. Cassandra continued to show off her speech. The power of demigods came entirely from their own bodies. At their peak, they were definitely not as good as the gods. Unfortunately, times had changed. The gods were burdened by their own priesthoods, and now they were not as good as her. She was far from that point, but the influence of the speech was stirring up everyone's hearts. Except for a few gods and people like Hippolyte who had magic equipment to resist the mind, the firstborn would win, and Hera would lose. Everyone could not help but have this thought. The morale of the Amazons was visibly low. Hera directly took out the scepter of the King of Gods and pointed it to the sky. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, and the huge thunder suppressed the speech. However, in Thea's eyes, it was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. The scepter could not be used all the time, and the mouth was on the other side's face. She could still continue to speak. Hera had been the queen for too long. Her combat experience was too poor. Before the war, she had exposed one of her trump cards. Perhaps she wanted to show her majesty, but it was really not wise. Chapter 603. Lightning flashed across the sky, and for a moment, an unparalleled force swept across the surroundings. It was as if the heavenly might had turned into divine thunder, and the scene fell into a strange silence. However, lightning was not a cloud, and it could not stay there forever. It came and went quickly, and in less than 10 seconds, it disappeared into nothingness. Other than making Hera look awe-inspiring, it wasn't of any use at all. Thea could see the sarcasm in the corner of Cassandra's mouth. This guy's spirit of speech was really effective at bewitching ordinary people. If she was allowed to spout nonsense, other than a few strong-willed Amazons, the rest would not be able to withstand it. Your Majesty, I have a subordinate who should be able to deal with the spirit of speech, Thea whispered to Hera. Hera looked at the brilliance in her eyes and knew what she meant. Without any nonsense, she made the decision and raised a finger, indicating that Cassandra could choose anything from Zeus's treasury. Hera, who had a lot of assets, did not care about the treasury at all. After all, the treasures belonged to Zeus, and the throne of the god was hers. Thea gave her a look that said, "Don't worry about me." She directly teleported back to Earth. Her subordinates on Earth were not suitable to deal with this kind of ability that involved the rules, so she directly called Ching Nu and the Green Lantern Corps. After revising the Corps mission, the number of people in the Corps had increased from the original 100 to more than 300. Thea did not summon all of them, and only asked Ching Nu to bring 100 people to help. The Green Lantern Corps teleportation ability was unparalleled in the world, and the Corps came very quickly. Thea briefly explained the situation and brought everyone back to Mount Olympus. The strange appearance of the Green Lanterns attracted a burst of amazement from the gods. Thea felt that their worldview was still stuck in the era of the square sky and square earth, and they really could not explain what kind of existence aliens were. Ching Nu, who was holding the Book of Nu, directly showed the giant book. Compassion turned into subtle energy and poured into the hearts of the wavering Amazons. The fearful ones were encouraged, and the hesitant ones regained their courage. The reckless ones regained their rationality, and the cowardly ones straightened their chests. The remaining Green Lanterns established a new line of defense, a line of defense for the soul. Compassion was incomparably inclusive. It could accept good words, and it could also absorb evil words. This was the purpose of Thea calling them here. That person really needs to be pitied. Ching Nu saw her eldest son and said in a calm voice, "You want to brainwash a god?" Thea looked at Ching Nu, who was becoming more and more otherworldly by the day, and her mind began to churn. To be honest, this was a good idea. The firstborn's strength was similar to hers. If he was washed into the green lamp, the green lamp's weak fighting power would be improved. In addition, it would allow the eldest son to let go of his hatred and reunite with Hera and her son. It could be said to be a great thing. But the premise is that you have to subdue him first. How about shooting light waves to brainwash him? Thea didn't have the ability to do that. The resistance of the gods was too high. She needed some ingenious plans to carry it out. While Thea was thinking about the feasibility of brainwashing the firstborn, Cassandra was still talking at the foot of the mountain until her throat was dry. She found that there was no movement on the mountain and looked at the firstborn awkwardly. Trash. The ferocious firstborn pushed Cassandra away like a ferocious beast. His eyes were murderous. When he saw Hera's figure, he suppressed the last bit of rationality in his heart, took out a dragon-tooth javelin from behind, and threw it at Hera. Diana grabbed her shield and wanted to block it, but Thea caught her. She secretly raised 3 fingers at Hera and raised her reward to 3 treasures. Seeing that Hera nodded happily, Thea took out the soft whip at her waist. This was the divine weapon of the god of Mars, Helamir. She had changed its appearance and reappeared in the divine world. With a crisp crack, Thea shook the whip and exerted force on her wrist. The soft whip stretched tens of thousands of meters and blocked the dragon-tooth javelin in the air. The fiery red whip was deflected by a small angle. The tip of the whip was like a giant red snake that wrapped around the black javelin. The dragon-tooth javelin lost its momentum and was directly thrown away. For a moment, Thea became the focus of the gods. The few gods on the Greek side did not know why she was interfering. This was the battle of the gods of Olympus. She was not one of them, right? The firstborn was also puzzled. Who was this guy in a golden robe with a hood that obscured his face? You are. Which god? The firstborn was very frank. He asked directly. Thea wanted to say that she was just passing by, but she could not say that. If she did not resist, Diana would have to do it. She could only bite the bullet. She did not answer the other party's question. It was really difficult to answer. The firstborn was here for revenge and also to see the throne of the god king. Whether from a legal or moral point of view, his reasons were legitimate. Thea stepped up, but she could not mention anything about the Greek gods. In order to avoid being unjustified, she had to think of a reason. She thought for a while and said, "I heard that you are the firstborn of Zeus. I want to challenge you." The firstborn was a little confused at first, but he quickly reacted. What was this guy doing here? Challenging him? He smiled with a ferocious face. Well, let me see what you can do first. After that, he pulled out a sword from the void. The blade was 10 meters long. Compared to the firstborn's height of 3 meters, it looked a little funny when he waved it around. The blade was edgeless and gray, more like a stone pillar. It was only because of the murderous intent that one would think that it was a murderous weapon. The main material of this sword was the spine of the black dragon that I killed years ago. It has been hammered in the earth's core for 6,000 years. Today, it will drink the blood of the gods. The firstborn was still putting pressure on Thea. Chimph Thea sneered. What an outdated guy. Was the black dragon that powerful? The mags and warriors had killed many dragons. If these giant reptiles had not escaped into the dimensional space, the dragons would have been listed as a level 1 protected animal. In a world that you do not know. Thea raised her soft whip. This is the weapon of a god. Wasn't he just bragging about his achievements? Who was afraid of him? What's so great about killing a dragon? I killed a god. The firstborn did not want to waste any more time with her. He stood up and rushed towards her with the 10-meter-long sword in his hand. Bravado. 2 gods fighting on the mountain would inevitably hurt the innocent. Thea set the battlefield to be in the air. She swung the soft whip in her hand and poured magic into it. A silver-white flame ignited on the tip of the whip. Silver fire. This was the technique that Thea learned from Romia's living fire. Unlike the firstborn who extracted it from a huge amount of spiritual power, Thea could only use pure magic to imitate it. The uniqueness of the living fire disappeared and was replaced by the flexibility of magic power. The firstborn was caught off guard and the whip wrapped around his ankle. He hurriedly swung his sword at the soft whip. Thea pulled back the whip, but the silver fire was still attached to the firstborn. The dragon leather boots with amazing magic resistance sizzled as they were burned. Not bad. The firstborn reached out his huge palm and grabbed the silver fire. He exerted force with both hands and crushed the flame. I'm very capable. The silver flames that filled the sky were continuously danced by her. Chapter 604. You can take 1 or 2 balls of fire, but try hundreds or thousands of balls. Thea's magic quickly transformed. Her whip was like a snake, constantly flinging out silver flames. For a moment, the originally starry realm of the gods seemed to have multiplied. Countless silver flames with deadly light shrouded the whole sky. Try my silver flame cage. The flames were controlled by Thea, advancing and retreating in an orderly manner like a group of well-trained soldiers. The firstborn swung its long sword with all its might. The dragon sword tempered by the core of the earth was not afraid of the silver flames. The flames transformed from the purest magic were shattered by the firstborn. The residue fell to the ground, but it could still burn the spirits into ashes. Cassandra, who was in command of the army, hurriedly led the army away from the battlefield. The firstborn's fight was not ineffective. It was just that the firstborn was fast, but Thea was faster. The colorless and transparent silver flames gradually piled up in the sky. The firstborn saw that the flames were increasing. It immediately stopped slashing and increased its speed to the maximum, ready to fight Thea in close combat. The firstborn ignored the flames. Its dragon skin with amazing magic resistance was burning black smoke. A large part of its open chest was also burned by the flames. But the distance between the two was rapidly closing. Your father is the god of thunder and lightning. I don't know how resistant you are to thunder and lightning. Thea's long whip kept dancing. It wrapped around the firstborn's wrist that was holding the sword. Her left hand gathered an amazing amount of thunder and lightning, and she threw it at the firstborn's face. Sparks danced. The gorgeous and deadly lightning struck the firstborn with an invincible momentum. The god who could make Zeus afraid did not hesitate. The muscles in his arms bulged, and he used all his strength to punch the lightning. With a muffled bang, Thea's lightning was shattered by the firstborn's physical strength. He did not use any divine power or skill, just an unparalleled amount of strength. She hated this kind of guy who did not use any skills. Thea was secretly angry. Although her attack was ineffective, at least she knew what the firstborn was relying on, and that was his strong body. The firstborn's physical strength was extraordinary. The two quickly closed the distance between them, and the 10-meter-long giant sword was swung horizontally towards Thea's waist. In the face of this sword that made a sonic boom, she could only temporarily dodge. She took out the holy sword and swung it with 10,000 rays of light, aiming straight for the firstborn's head. Under her control, the raging silver flames that filled the sky also rushed towards the firstborn. This guy ignored the burning of the silver fire, ignored the dazzling light, and focused on fighting Thea. After 3 moves, even though the firstborn seemed to have crawled out of the oven and Thea was forced to retreat, both of them chose to land on the ground and fight on the ground. Thea abandoned her whip and held her sword with both hands. Without any fancy moves, she slashed straight down. Of course, the firstborn would not use its head to test the edge of her sword. With a quick twist of its wrist, the firstborn drew an arc with its greatsword, trying to use its advantage of strength to deflect her attack. Unfortunately, it underestimated Thea's strength and the sharpness of the holy sword. In terms of pure strength, Thea was definitely not as good as it. Even a pure warrior like Diana was not as good as it. It was just that Thea had mixed the power of the soul in her sword. The power of the soul could be strong or weak. The Martian hunter could slay gods with this power, but she had not reached that level. She just added the power of the soul to herself, and for a short time, it was enough to contend with the firstborn. The firstborn, who had underestimated its opponent, did not expect that this slender opponent had so much strength. Not only did it not deflect her attack, but it also left itself wide open. The holy sword with great force was about to hit the firstborn's head. The firstborn's weapon was too long, and it was too late to turn back, so it could only stretch out its left arm to block. The firstborn had a gauntlet on each of its arms. She did not see it clearly before, but now Thea saw that it was not a gauntlet, but 2 huge dragon teeth. The dragon teeth that resisted the holy sword were naturally the dragon teeth. They were as white as jade, and there were bursts of dragon aura emanating from them. However, against Thea, even the black dragon himself would be finished, let alone a dead tooth. With a crisp crack, the bright holy sword cut directly into the dragon teeth. At first, there was a slight delay, but soon it went all the way down, cutting the giant tooth in half from the middle. The holy sword did not stop and directly cut through the firstborn's dragon skin armor. Seeing that it was about to hurt the firstborn's body, the firstborn sacrificed the armor to buy himself less than 1/10 of a second. The firstborn's giant sword also turned to attack Thea. He relied on his own body and traded injuries for injuries. As the eldest son who relied on himself to fight since birth, he had suffered countless injuries. His strongest weapon was not so much the great sword, but rather his tempered body. If Thea continued to cut, even if she could cut off the firstborn's arm, she would also be injured. She was only there to help, so naturally, she would not risk her life so much. She stepped on the ground and left the firstborn's attack range. Sneaky guy, you are qualified to be my opponent. The firstborn's fighting spirit was completely aroused. It had been a long time since he met a god of the same level, and he was too lazy to ask who his opponent was. Mate, you talk as if you are so powerful, but that's all there is to it. Thea's voice was blurred by divine power, and it was impossible to tell whether it was a man or a woman. The firstborn had rich combat experience and would not underestimate the opponent because of the opponent's weakness, nor would it be angry because of slight. Realizing that the opponent was not inferior to itself, its fighting style began to become more stable. The gods watching the battle on Mount Olympus naturally had their own thoughts. Some were surprised, and some were jealous. Eris, the goddess of strife, walked to Diana with a sinister smile on her face. Your little lover seems to be more powerful than you. As your sister, I really feel sorry for you. You have such a good aptitude, but now you have been surpassed. How does it feel? Diana was watching Thea's battle attentively, ready to save her if there was an emergency. To hell with the rules of the battle of gods. At first, she did not understand what Eris meant, but after a while, she realized that she was trying to drive a wedge between them. She sneered. Go away, Eris, you bitch who only knows how to show off your tongue. After that, she no longer looked at her. Diana's love was simple and single-minded. Once she confirmed her lover, she would repay him with everything she had. In the world of the League of Injustice, she had done countless bad things with Superman, and the starting point was her love for Superman. Her love was higher than her own values, and even a little blind. Thea had always known this, but she had never meant to correct it. If Thea became evil, Batman and the Martian Manhunter would immediately become her enemy, and Oliver would also stop her. Only Diana would always be by her side. Even if she had to fight with her friends, turn against her people, or even become the enemy of the whole world, she would go on without regrets for the love in her heart. So Eris's self-righteous provocation was laughable and boring in the eyes of the Valkyrie. She did not even bother to explain. The greater the achievement of her lover, the happier she would be. Jealous? How could it be? Chapter 605. Is she using some kind of secret technique to increase her combat power? Hera's question was more normal. She had to be concerned. She did not have the combat power to fight against the firstborn. If Thea and Diana left, she could only ignore the dignity of the Divine King and live like a coward. This choice was worse than death in the eyes of Hera, who had always been prideful. In the face of her mother and Antiope's superior, Diana still maintained a relative respect. She answered readily, this is her real combat power. There are still many tricks that she has not shown. When it came to her lover, Diana's heart was full of joy. She was not boasting. Seeing that Thea and the firstborn were evenly matched in close combat, she was confident that her lover could win. After all, Thea's strength was not close combat. She used her weakness to attack the enemy's strength. She was more testing the enemy's strength. It turned out that her guess was not wrong. Thea was indeed gathering information. There was not much divine power in the firstborn. It relied more on its physical strength to fight against the combination of divine power and spiritual power. It was not weak. A strong body brought about an all-round improvement. Its strength was great, its speed was fast, and its stamina was almost endless. However, the firstborn's weakness was still obvious. Its strength was completely dependent on its body. Opponents who were not as strong as it could only feel deep despair because they could not kill it. If one was on the same level as it, one would find a weakness that was not a weakness. The firstborn lacked the means to win in one blow. Thea, who was confident, began to attack. The strong confidence made her spiritual power rise to another level. The firstborn on the opposite side had the trait of becoming more and more courageous as it fought. It also squeezed out physical strength crazily in the fierce battle. And as the number of injuries increased, its physical attack power became more and more powerful. The holy sword and the giant sword kept colliding. The holy sword that gathered the faith of all beings was still shining brightly, while the firstborn's giant sword was a little overwhelmed. So what if it was the spine of the black dragon? So what if it was buried in the earth's core for 6,000 years? It was still cut like a saw by Thea. The range of the battle between the two was getting larger and larger. At first, the firstborn was still worried about its subordinates. Later, when the battle became more intense, it became hot-headed and could not care less. Many ghosts and beasts were hit by the aftershocks. Some were directly scattered by the enormous force of the giant sword, while others were hit by the radiance of the holy sword and turned into ashes. It was as if they had never existed. Cassandra could only tell the army to dodge. It was easy to say, but the army of close to 100,000 could not dodge at all. The evil Thea purposely dragged the firstborn into the enemy's army, and many of the ghost creatures were in for a bloodbath. Wherever the two of them passed, it could be said to be a mess. The battle lasted for an hour. The firstborn was still in high spirits, but Thea was a little tired. Combining multiple powers required a lot of energy. She had finally figured out the strength of the firstborn, and she began to go all out. Spotting an opening, Thea infused a large amount of soul power, divine power, and mana into her holy sword as she slashed down at the firstborn who could not dodge in time. Not knowing why the opponent suddenly attacked, the firstborn chose to defend cautiously. It moved its great sword horizontally, trying to block the attack. What happened next stunned him. Thea did not intend to hurt the enemy at all. She wanted to destroy the firstborn's sword. The firstborn's parry missed. Without the support of his power, the great sword could only rely on its own material to block the oncoming holy sword. With a crisp clang, 1/3 of the great sword was cut off by the holy sword. She wants to destroy my weapon? The firstborn felt very distressed for a moment, and thought that he understood Thea's sinister intentions. However, this was all an illusion. To deal with a person who could create miracles with great power, one had to use a dirty trick. Using the loophole in his mind, Thea finally began to use the divine power of wealth when the two of them passed by each other. She took off her hood and revealed her stunning face. "Look into my eyes." Her confused eyes mixed with a large amount of compassion directly hit the firstborn's mind. Anger was still not fully mastered, and the opponent's rage points were already high enough. There was really no need to add fuel to the fire. As for fear, it was not practical either. Hatred had a strong counteracting effect on fear. In the end, Sia chose compassion, which was the most inclusive of all. "I'll be merciful and pity you." Such a strange attack really hit the firstborn's weak spot. Growing up in the wilderness, there were no gods to teach him how to use his divine power. Without guidance, he only knew how to train his body over and over again. He had no experience in dealing with emotional shocks. Even if his chest was full of hatred, Thea's confusing divine power still pried open a gap, and a large amount of compassion poured into his heart. He hated the heavens and the earth, but was it not because he lacked love and a kind of self-protection from his loved ones? As the compassion poured into his heart, the direct result was that his fierce eyes showed signs of calmness, and the murderous aura that shrouded his body shrank visibly. Unlike mortals, the firstborn was after all a god, and the first son of Zeus and Hera. He knew that he was confused and struggled to suppress the calmness in his heart, trying to find himself again. After 2 tries, he found that the effect was not great. No matter how great his hatred was, it was not enough in the face of the compassion of all intelligent beings in the universe. Helplessly, he could only force himself to chase after Thea. His combat instinct told him that as long as he killed this woman, he could find himself again. Thea did not feel good about brainwashing a god with compassion. Compassion poured into the firstborn's heart through her body as a medium. She also had to stay awake at all times to avoid being taken advantage of. Her advantage over the firstborn was that her spiritual power was much higher than the other parties. Although her compassion was a little indiscriminate between friend and foe, she still had some advantages as a controller. To kill 1,000 enemies, she would lose 800 of her own men. No matter how she looked at it, her chances of winning were higher. The seed of the heart had been planted, and the next step was to continue to absorb emotions and then transfer them into the firstborn's heart. Thea did not want to fight the firstborn head-on. She used flash to buy time. No matter how powerful a god was, it was still an individual. How could it resist the convergence of the universe's emotions in the spiritual world? It was not that such an existence did not exist, but the firstborn in front of her certainly did not have this ability. Their chase slowly came to a stop because they were too tired. Thea's forehead was soaked with sweat, and round beads of sweat dripped down her smooth chin to the ground. The firstborn on the opposite side was even worse. He barely stood there with his long sword, his whole body covered in sweat. The speed of losing control of the spiritual world was accelerating, and the external symptoms were that half of his face was calm and peaceful, while the other half was full of tension and resentment. Thea did not expect this guy to be so resistant. He was using his strong points to attack the enemy's weak points, and it was so tiring. But seeing that victory was in sight, she unilaterally increased the output of emotions. She had to convert this guy before the two armies. Chapter 606. The gods were watching. Some of them did not know what Thea and the firstborn were doing. Gods like ours, the god of war, and Dionysus, the god of wine, could not understand. Some knew, such as Hera and Eris, the goddess of strife. These magic and spiritual types could feel the emotions violently attacking the self-consciousness of the firstborn. Hera, the biological mother, was a little conflicted about the brainwashing of the firstborn, but it was not a bad thing to be brainwashed. As for Diana, who knew Thea best, there was only nervousness left. The confrontation in the spiritual world was very dangerous, and she could only look at her lover worriedly. Most of the gods were watching with an optimistic attitude. The firstborn was defeated, and Thea had the upper hand. This could be seen without a deep vision. Cassandra, who was leading the army of the firstborn, could only watch. Limited by her realm, she could only be anxious and helpless. Just as she was hesitating, a subtle and undetectable voice floated into her ears. After a little hesitation, she finally made up her mind. Firstborn, think about your past. Your revenge has not been avenged. You were exiled at birth and persisted for 6,000 years. Remember your mission, remember the injustice of fate. Remember. Cassandra spoke quickly. Her voice was so loud that it resounded throughout the battlefield. The firstborn, who was getting more and more confused, finally managed to suppress the erosion of compassion with the power of the spirit of speech. However, the price of Cassandra's participation was extremely high. The spirit of speech always had a limit, and the emotional energy that had been accumulated was suddenly detonated. The firstborn could be said to be the strongest old god except for Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, and Thea was also the best of the new gods. The gods, including Diana, had been watching on the sidelines. On the one hand, it was because the battle of the gods had always been one-on-one, and this was a matter of rules. On the other hand, it was beyond their power. If they were not at the level of Zeus or the Father, rashly joining was simply courting death. Cassandra understood this, but she also vowed to take revenge on the gods. Without the help of the firstborn, she could do nothing. If the firstborn was instigated by the other party, it would be even more disastrous. Therefore, after receiving the secret reminder, even if she knew the price, she still rushed into this battle. The firstborn's strong resistance and Thea's crazy infusion were all withstood by her. She was just an ordinary demigod. How could she withstand the combined attack of two true gods? Puff! With a loud explosion, a large amount of blood spurted out. Unlike ordinary people who vomited blood from their mouths, Cassandra vomited blood from her throat. The violent emotional energy directly exploded in her throat, and her vocal cords, trachea, and throat were blown to pieces. Her innate gift of speech was directly crippled, and her neck was badly mangled. She fell to the ground, and it was unknown whether she was dead or alive. On the other side, the two true gods were also suffering. The firstborn barely kept his consciousness and escaped the fate of being brainwashed, but he looked extremely tired. His original brown-black skin was now as white as paper. When his emotions exploded, he and Cassandra spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their hands holding the sword trembled uncontrollably. Thea also had blood in the corner of her mouth. The emotional backlash made her very uncomfortable. But her spiritual resistance was much higher than the firstborn's, and she had been the one on the attack, so she suffered less damage. Thea's eyes wandered, and she automatically looked at the empty space on the other side of the battlefield. She waved her soft whip, and a figure jumped out from the raging silver fire. He was dressed in rags, holding a cane, and a pair of bird's claws where his feet should be. Thea was very unhappy that her conversion had failed. She looked at the person with a gloomy face and said, "Hermes, you insidious villain." Hermes, who had lost his hypocritical face, looked indifferent. He looked coldly at Cassandra and the firstborn, and the corner of his mouth drew a contemptuous arc. His eyes could not help but look at Thea. "Your strength is so strong that you can suppress the firstborn of Zeus. You are really extraordinary. But how much strength do you have left now?" Hermes said as he gently stroked his cane and pulled out a very thin blade. Thea wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and said, "This firstborn did consume a lot of my divine power, but I still have companions." "What do you have?" Following her words, Diana also came to her side. The Valkyrie looked coldly at Hermes, the guy who had deceived her. "Tell us where Zola and her child are, and we can spare your life." Diana stood in front of Thea with two swords in her hands and asked sternly. Hermes let out a burst of silent ridicule, filled with disdain and contempt. Thea was disgusted by his attitude. She resisted the discomfort and set up a time-stop enchantment. She wanted to join hands with Diana to take down this annoying bug. But the accident still happened. Hermes turned into a stream of light and ran out of her enchantment in an instant. In Thea's view, this speed was not inferior to Barry's. Hermes was not so fast in the past. There was the twilight of the gods, and then there was the rise of the god of speed. Hermes, who had speed as his priesthood, should be lying in the nursing home with ours. How could he suddenly burst into such high speed? Surprised. "I was faster than this when I was at my peak. This is only half of my speed." As if he had expected their doubts, Hermes smiled grimly and pointed at the gods on the mountain peak. Since we are brothers and sisters, let me remind you that His Majesty Hade's army is about to flatten Mount Olympus. Think carefully about your position. After that, he took out a black whistle from his arms. An obscure sound wave shrouded the army of the firstborn. All the spirits seemed to have received some kind of signal, and one by one, they rushed to the Amazon camp. Hermes teleported away with the firstborn under Thea and Diana's angry eyes. As for Cassandra, who was lying in a pool of blood, he did not even look at her. The army of nearly 100,000 spirits did not distinguish between friend and foe. The werewolves of the firstborn and the Amazons were all within their attack range. The battlefield was in chaos. The gods were shocked by the news of Hade's impending arrival. Antiope, who was facing the attack, fought hard, but still had some of his subordinates injured. "I'm fine. You go and help." Thea certainly could not stop Diana. This kind of low-intensity battle would not affect her. Fighting side by side with her people may further understand the meaning of protection. As for herself, she was sore all over and did not have much combat power at the moment. After teleporting back to the top of the mountain, the gods also felt that it was beneath their dignity to be frightened by a sentence. They all began to clean up the army of spirits. The green lamps helped Thea to calm her spiritual world and shared the burden of compassion. With the help of the gods, the Amazons' defense line quickly stabilized. Javelins, crossbows, and many other weapons that were infused with magical light entered the battle. The ghost creatures fell like wheat being harvested, turning into a cloud of smelly black ash. Chapter 607. Diana did not take the initiative to attack, but continued to support everywhere. Even if there were a few injured female warriors, she would send them to the rear in time. With the help of Ching Enu's Book of Enu, they would quickly recover. The battle lasted for a whole day, and a large number of ghostly creatures were finally wiped out by the gods. The werewolves, who were loyal to the firstborn, fled the battlefield soon after the battle. One of the key figures of the war, Cassandra, was captured by the Amazons who were inspecting the battlefield. The Princess of Troy was still alive, but her injuries were too serious and she was still in a coma. The broken part of the firstborn's greatsword was also picked up by Diana. Even if it was only 1/3 of the sword, it was still nearly 3 meters long. The spine of the black dragon had been forged in the core of the earth, and Diana, who was also proficient in forging, felt that it would be a good material no matter what weapon it was made of. Thea finally eased her discomfort with the help of the Green Lanterns, and Diana entered her spiritual world again to help her slowly stabilize. The Valkyrie was also exhausted. She was a very pure warrior goddess, and she liked swords, fists, and feet more than spiritual power. Fortunately, her level was high, and her shortcomings were not obvious. She also knew how to use spiritual power. After 3 full days, the 2 goddesses, mainly Thea, finally recovered. Occasionally, she would have a headache, but it did not affect the overall situation. Her spiritual power was less than half of her peak, and she could not brainwash the firstborn in a short time. Plus, the other party was prepared and would not be fooled again. Thea was quite regretful that she had lost this good opportunity. The firstborn was very powerful, and it would be a super fierce fighter in the Green Lantern Corps. Yes, she worked so hard to brainwash firstborn, but not for Hera. Thea did not intend to return him in the first place. An appropriate ceasefire would have been enough. You didn't take your own son with you, and now that he has reached the maximum level, you want to repair the relationship. How could there be such a good thing? Unfortunately, all her plans fell through. An insignificant character ruined her plan, and Thea was very upset. When she heard that Cassandra was captured, she took Diana to have a look. Miserable, really miserable. Cassandra, who was facing an emotional explosion, was lying on the bed alone. There was no one around to take care of her. Fortunately, she was also the daughter of Zeus, so no one abused her. However, her beautiful face was twitching because of the pain. There was a big bloody hole in her neck, which still showed her reckless behavior. Thea stretched out her hand and released a ball of magic to examine her. After a while, she snorted coldly. This troublemaker could be said to be completely crippled. Her vocal organs had exploded into a bloody mist. Even if her skin and flesh grew back, her talent had already left her forever along with her vocal cords. In order to take revenge against the gods, this woman was willing to sacrifice herself in order to retain the power to challenge the gods. Needless to say, it was similar to the spider woman Aramani. There must be a tragic story behind this. Thea could only say that the Greek gods had done too many immoral things, and she had to take the blame for them again. Walking out of the lounge, he saw that the Amazons were still passionately preparing for battle. However, the gods were a little disappointed. The Netherworld king had given them too much pressure. In the evening, Hera gathered the gods to discuss the next step of the plan. There were 2 empty chairs at the scene. The goddess of agriculture and the goddess of strife had run away. The only one left was Ars, the god of war, who was on his last breath. The old man sat on the chair with his eyes half closed. If it weren't for his weak breathing, Thea would have thought that he was dead. The other 2 present were Dionysus, the god of wine, and Hephaestus, the god of fire. The god of fire had a good relationship with Diana and Thea. Unfortunately, he had a good clergy in vain. Because of his hobbies, he had changed his talent tree from the original god of fire to the current god of blacksmiths. He was also a god of faith. Where could you find a blacksmith in the 21st century? He was supposed to be a fierce warrior in the front lines, but now he had completely become a support staff and was extremely weak. The remaining god of wine had some fighting power. There were people who liked wine in all ages. He did not have many believers, but it had never stopped. He could be said to be the god in the best condition. But the god of wine, just by hearing his name, one could tell that he was weak. It was impossible to expect him to defeat Hades. Hera was speechless as she looked at her subordinates. The old were old, and the weak were weak. This was also the reason why she hurriedly invited Thea and Diana when she heard that they had recovered. "Your Majesty Hera, what's with Hermes' speed?" Thea asked her own question first. Unlike Barry's reverse lightning, the resistance of mortals to magic was completely different from that of gods. If many speed reduction spells did not work, Thea would be very passive when dealing with an extremely fast enemy. It should be that Hades gave him something from the underworld. If I'm not wrong, Hermes' way of life has been rewritten. He doesn't look like a living being now. Without the disadvantage of being jealous, Hera's knowledge was unparalleled after following Zeus for so many years. She analyzed calmly. Undead. Lich. Zombie. These were the things that came to Thea's mind. Sacrificing one's life to turn oneself into a high-level undead creature. But Hermes' sacrifice was not a small one. Giving up the dignity of a god and becoming Hades' henchman was not a good decision. However, Hermes had recovered a lot of strength, which troubled Thea. Speed was really not something she was good at. Hera lowered her head and pondered. The army of the underworld was boundless. Even Zeus couldn't ignore it when he was still alive. Due to the rules, the number of dead in the underworld had to be maintained at a certain level. Hades couldn't mobilize all of his forces, but even 1/10 of them was a terrifying number. Judging from the fact that Hermes could control those ghost creatures, the Firstborn and Hades must have some behind-the-scenes deals. The difficult situation gave Hera a headache. She looked at Thea. "The next time the Firstborn comes, can you still stop him?" Thea thought for a moment. She did not want to give up the Firstborn as an excellent fighter. Olivier was stubborn. In fact, she also had this trait in her character, but she thought it was called persistence. "He must be prepared. I can't guarantee it. Our comprehensive strength is about the same. He's good at close combat, and I'm good at long range. It's hard to say who will win." Of course, Thea would not guarantee it. At the same time, she thought to herself that the Firstborn would attack again. If she did not recover to her best state, perhaps she should gather all the green lamps together next time. The meeting ended hastily, and no one could make any constructive suggestions. In order to encourage or comfort Thea, Hera directly opened Zeus's collection room and let her choose 3 treasures. This was a deal for Thea. Her friendship with Hera was far from the point where she would stand up for her. Getting paid for doing things was in line with the purpose of the goddess of wealth and trade. In the face of the wide-open treasury, she did not stand on ceremony. She pulled Diana and walked in. As a powerful and restless god-king, Zeus's treasury could be said to be the best in the world. Unlike the heavenly father who liked to stay at home and did not step out of the house, Zeus's old man was young at heart. He wandered around the world and found many little girls, and he did not let go of any treasures. He was powerful and had a good eye. Countless treasures were picked up by him and brought back to his home. The goddess of wealth had her own identification skill. Even if she could not name many treasures, Thea knew the general purpose, and that was enough for her to choose. Many treasures, even with Thea's current strength, were tempting. The dazzling brilliance made her little heart beat wildly. She was not a law-abiding person. She could not help but think, how nice it would be if these treasures were hers. Chapter 608. However, she also knew that this was just wishful thinking. After all, Boss Zeus was still alive. Making a deal with Hera was fair and just. No one would say anything if she took a few treasures, but if she took them away in the dark of the night, she would be in big trouble. The trouble with happiness was that there were too many choices. Back on Paradise Island, Thea was happy for a few nights with a fake godslayer. At that time, she thought that there were very few treasures in the world and that it was not easy to find them. Until today, Thea realized that it was not that there were few treasures in the world, but that Zeus had taken all the treasures back home in advance. Taking advantage of the fact that he had created his account early, this boss had probably ransacked the entire place, which was why the outside world was so clean. Even a piece of divine artifact could be used as a treasure, while the treasures in his own home were piled up like a mountain. Boss Zeus had fully demonstrated what it meant to walk the path of others and leave them with no way out. What should she choose? Thea stroked her chin and pondered. Diana was looking at these treasures with the intention of broadening her horizons. She could not give any constructive suggestions. Thea looked at Hera, who was standing outside the door of the treasury. This person was also very cunning. She seemed to be generous and let Thea choose whatever she wanted. In fact, there were definitely good and bad treasures in here. If she picked a good one, she would have profited. If she picked a bad one, she could only blame it on her bad luck. Hera was not responsible for explaining. Everything depended on her. Thea could only concentrate her divine power in her eyes. She wanted to use her position as the god of wealth to find the most valuable item in this treasury. Her eyes were full of radiance. Thea could not name many treasures, so she could only judge by the god of wealth. A nameless gauntlet, 1 meter of golden light. Thea picked it up and looked at it, then put it down. She turned her head and saw a black iron arrow, 1 meter of golden light. This is the hidden arrow that killed Achilles. Diana explained. Thea weighed the arrow in her hand. She did not like this kind of weapon that hurt people secretly, so she put the iron arrow back to its original position and continued to search. As she walked, she found a good item. It was a shiny golden cup. The Eye of Wealth determined that this cup was very valuable. Leto used the sunlight of the Aegean Sea to forge the Holy Grail for her son, Apollo. It shines like the sun even in the dark night. Legend has it that it can even eliminate negative emotions and all kinds of darkness. Diana looked at it for a long time this time and compared it with her memory. Thea felt that this thing was not bad, mainly because of its ability to eliminate negative emotions. It was very convenient for her to control anger. She ticked this Holy Grail in her heart and left it for last. After that, she saw many treasures. She wasn't lacking in weapons and armor at the moment, so her gaze was all on those treasures with miraculous effects. Most of the evil items were not in his consideration. His main focus was on the legendary treasures, such as Odysseus' ruby, which was given to him by his wife, Penelope, on the eve of his expedition to Troy. The ruby contained the love of a wife. Thea also saw the famous golden apple. As long as she carried this apple with her, it would increase her charm. Her charm attribute was about to explode. It was better to leave it for Hera to admire. Hey! While she was strolling around, a ball in the corner suddenly caught her attention. Golden fleece. A furry ball of fleece was casually piled up in the corner. Compared to the many divine weapons and sub-divine weapons, this ball of fleece was insignificant. However, Thea's divine power of wealth told her that this thing was priceless. How could this be? Thea touched the fleece. Other than being a little soft, there didn't seem to be anything unusual. What was she going to do with this thing? Was she going to make a scarf? Thea's thoughts diverged as she pondered about its use. She shook her head and smiled secretly. She stood up and was about to continue looking at other things. However, just as she took a step, a strong premonition in her heart told her that she would miss something if she left. The premonition came without reason. She turned back. That's right, this ball of fleece was the most dazzling thing in the entire treasure room. Perhaps it had an unknown use or contained some secrets. Trust your intuition. Thea didn't hesitate and picked up the fleece. After picking and choosing for a long time, she finally chose Austin's ruby of love, Leto's golden cup, and the golden fleece whose use she couldn't explain. Hera didn't comment on her choice. She had the right to choose. Whether she earned or lost, it had nothing to do with her. The ruby of love could provide her with enough love and emotions, but the process of absorbing them would come after anger. The golden cup would automatically take effect when placed next to her. It could eliminate all kinds of negative emotions. For her, who dealt with all kinds of emotions every day, it was a rare divine weapon. Thea carried the golden fleece back to her room. She and Diana closed the door to study it. The two studied from myths and legends to the golden fleece's diet and genetic mutation, but they didn't find anything. Did I make the wrong choice? Thea was a little unconfident. What could this thing be used for? Could it be used to make long johns for the long-legged goddess? Just as she was letting her thoughts run wild, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. Among the golden fleece, a small thread caught her attention. Although it was also yellow, the fleece was golden. What caught her attention was a pale yellow thread. The moment Thea saw the thread, she seemed to see quicksand passing through her fingertips. Time flew by quickly, the sun, the moon, and the stars were constantly changing. An indescribable feeling of vicissitudes flowed in her heart. What is this? This is fleece, you must be kidding me. Thea only felt that it was ridiculous. Although it was just a glance, the power of the thread was something that even she couldn't resist. Among the people she had seen in her life, perhaps only the Heavenly Father could resist it. If this was the golden fleece, then wouldn't the original male sheep be heaven-defying? She called Diana to take a look. A magical scene appeared. Diana looked in the direction of her finger for a long time, but didn't see any strange thread. Thea was confused. Am I the only one who can see it? Thea's little heart was beating fast. She asked Diana to keep a lookout for her and carefully studied it. It was too reckless to touch it directly. She separated a trace of her spiritual power and tried to communicate with the thread. At least she had to know what it was. As soon as the spiritual power touched it, it was shattered before any information could be transmitted. Thea thought that it was an offensive weapon. She carefully guarded for a long time, only to find that the thread was still hidden in the pile of fleece. There was no further movement at all. The eldest young miss was a little confused. There was no doubt that this thread was very magical. Sia calmed down and thought of several worst-case scenarios. In order to prevent accidents from happening, she prepared several instantaneous spells in advance and firmly locked onto her own coordinates. Unless it was an existence far more powerful than her, it was impossible to teleport her away. Only then did she try to touch the silk thread for the second time. Chapter 609. The second test also ended in failure. The golden thread stubbornly cut off the connection between the two sides and did not say anything. Diana could not help with this kind of mysterious thing. She carefully thought about various myths and legends, but could not remember anything special about this sheep. This thread should not be from the golden fleece. It's more like it was mixed in and was accidentally brought out by you. Diana carefully analyzed for her and could only come to this conclusion. Thea could also think of this. How could the golden sheep be so powerful just as a background? If even a hair of the golden sheep was so powerful, Hera would not have to worry about the firstborn and Hades. If the enemy came again, she could just close the door and let the sheep go. Then Thea began to persevere with the golden thread. On the fourth try, she increased the output of her spiritual power and finally saw something. It turned out that she was completely wrong before. The thread was not attacking her, but there was too much information and it directly exploded her spiritual power. Thea's spiritual power was not the same as strength and speed. It had always been her strength. Even if it was only a trace of her spiritual power, it was stronger than the total spiritual power of an ordinary person. Although she was not a god of faith and needed to respond to the prayers of believers from time to time, her total spiritual power could still crush 80% of the old and new gods today. She began to gradually increase her spiritual power while maintaining the necessary vigilance. At first, the images transmitted back were fragmented, like the ravings of a lunatic. She only saw scattered images of some tall buildings and people in the city. It was not until she injected a full 1/3 of her spiritual power that the mysterious thread was finally revealed in front of her eyes. What the hell was the golden fleece? Thea deeply realized the importance of the stacking of modern corporate items. She should tell the old man Zeus about the advanced concept of classification later. The way he piled all the treasures together was too low. After a long time, the old man would not know how many treasures he had. Now the thread mixed in the golden fleece was a clear proof. Diana couldn't see it because she didn't have enough mental power. Hera was a god who was good at magic, and she was now in charge of the king of gods' scepter. If she looked carefully, she would most likely be able to see it. It was only because she hadn't been paying attention that a treasure was mixed in with the wool, allowing Sia to pick it up. These were the threads of the three goddesses of fate. The three goddesses were Croso, who was in charge of the future and weaving the threads of life, Lachesis, who determined the length of the threads of life, and Atropos, who was responsible for severing the threads of life. The three goddesses were born at the beginning of the universe's chaos. They controlled the fate of the 12 titans represented by the second-generation god-king, Uranus, and the 12 Olympian gods represented by Zeus. Their authority could not be measured by the standards of the old gods or the new gods. They were not gods of faith like ours, nor were they gods of nature like Zeus. Their status was more transcendent. As the masters of fate, they were more like conceptual gods in Thea's eyes. The thread that Thea was in contact with was the thread of the future woven by the smallest of the three goddesses, Croso. It contained a power called fate. Ordinary people would talk about the future with longing, but from the perspective of the gods, there was only fear. The gods' level of life had reached the peak. In fact, they were very afraid of change. Today, there was a new god to replace the old one. Tomorrow, there would be a new god to replace the old one. Wanting to transcend the arrangement of fate was an impossible task. Just look at Reverse Lightning, who had racked his brains, and it was clear that no matter how hard he tried, he was still unable to escape the shackles of fate. The more he struggled, the closer fate would entangle him, until he breathed his last. Ever since the day she found out about her fate, Thea had been preparing for it, not only for her family, but also for herself. Back then, she had wanted to ride on the coattails of Superman and Batman, but now, the tables had turned. It was time for others to ride on her coattails. It seemed like she had gained a lot, but fate still did not let her go. Instead, it pushed her into the teeth of the storm. Because of her struggles, fate's shackles on her became tighter and tighter. Putting everything else aside, she was the main force in the war against Darkseid. Whether it was from the perspective of the Heavenly Father or from the perspective of the people on Earth, she was responsible. Those who were weak could do nothing, but those who were strong could not do so. Transmigrators could not do whatever they wanted. As long as they were in the game, they were also pawns of fate. Whether it was Reverse Lightning from the 25th century, the Queen of Emerald Eyes from the 31st century, or Lantern One, who had traveled 10 billion years and was nicknamed Reverend Eading, they all proved this. It was as if there was an invisible hand constantly pushing her forward. And now, this thread brought Thea a possibility. Perhaps she could break free from the shackles of fate in the future. It was too early to talk about the future. Aside from the unconventional forces, Thea was considered a powerhouse on Earth and in the universe. But so what? Even the fate of Darkseid's first lantern had been sealed. It was still a long time before she could break free from her fate. Thea tried to put the thread of fate into her spiritual space, but unfortunately, the thread could not go in at all. Should she find a place to hide it? But she was still worried. She now understood that Zeus had probably hidden the thread of fate in the golden fleece because it could not be taken away. Thea could not think of a better idea. The golden fleece could not be hidden, and she could not parade it around the city every day. She chose to hide it in her hair. She had blonde hair anyway, so it was not out of place. The golden fleece was still shining after the thread of fate was taken away, but it no longer had the inestimable value in Thea's eyes. It was now just a decent decoration. Should I make a scarf for you? Thea looked at the long-legged goddess mockingly. The golden fleece was of no use to gods who fought and killed all day. Diana knew her character, so she just laughed it off. The next day, Hera asked her about her thoughts on the underworld invasion in private. Although the main reason was that Thea did not have good taste, the second reason was that Thea did not tell the truth. As the subject of the transaction, the two sides had completed the transaction. Thea could take it with a clear conscience. She was willing to give it to her, but she still felt a little guilty when she remembered that Zeus was still alive. Your Majesty Hera, let me give you 3 suggestions. If Hades were to attack Mount Olympus, she would feel that the reward would be too much for her to handle. If she were to put in the effort to settle the matter, Zeus would have nothing to say even if he were to think about it in the future. Oh, please go ahead. Hera saw that she was serious and became serious. First, I suggest that you recall Hercules. He is an important fighting force of Mount Olympus. Wait, you mean Hercules is still alive? Hera was a little incredulous. I saw him a while ago. He just escaped from the seal. Thea nodded and waited for Hera to digest the news. To be honest, the relationship between Hera and Hercules was at the level of hatred in her opinion. Hercules was the son of Zeus and Alcmene. This woman was Zeus' great-granddaughter according to seniority. She was very evil with Zeus and gave birth to Hercules. The feud between Hera and Hercules could be written into a book. What's the next suggestion? Hera gritted her teeth. She was not very willing. Join forces with Poseidon and attack the underworld, Thea said with certainty. Chapter 6:10. Hera looked at her as if she was crazy. Are you talking nonsense? We were discussing how to resist Hades' army, and now you're telling me to fight back and join forces with Poseidon? You heard me right. I mean to gather the gods and fight in the underworld, forcing Hades to sign the treaty. Thea felt that fate was encouraging her to rush forward, but she really had to follow the established route. If Hades attacked Mount Olympus from time to time, Diana would have to come back every few days, and she wouldn't have time to do anything else. The final outcome would be the defeat of the gods, who would give up Mount Olympus and flee to the human world. Didn't Hades have an endless number of soldiers? She didn't need to use guerrilla warfare. She didn't want to fight a war of attrition with him. She wanted to attack his weakness and lead the gods to attack his base. Our soldiers are far inferior to his, but the gods are here. If Hercules is included, our high-end combat power can completely crush Hades. Poseidon's army will also take a large part of the pressure. Seeing that Hera was still hesitating, she could only continue her analysis. Mount Olympus, Poseidon, and Hades. Among them, we are the weakest, followed by Poseidon, and Hades is the strongest. I heard that the ownership of the river Styx has always been the focus of their debate. We can use this as a breakthrough to attack the underworld. Hera was still hesitating. This idea was too bold. She felt that it made some sense, but she was afraid that it would completely collapse because of a mistake. She clenched her fingers tightly and couldn't make up her mind. You want to start a war? I heard it. I have to say that it's a good idea. Ars, who was already in his twilight years, suddenly walked into the room and spoke his mind. Thea ignored Ars and continued to give Hera ideas. Diana can go find Hercules, but you have to give up your past views and accept him again. I can also persuade Poseidon. Hera was a little surprised that Milady was going all out for the thread of fate. She didn't understand why Milady was so proactive. I'm still the God King. I'm not in a hurry. Why are you so anxious? She couldn't figure it out, but it was a good thing. She lowered her head and thought. Hercules, as long as he doesn't object, I can accept him again on behalf of Mount Olympus. As for the personal grudge between us, if he is willing to take a step back, I can pretend that it never happened. Hera said through gritted teeth. The grudges between her and the Hercules were far too abundant. How could they be erased with a smile? How could that be? The only way was for both sides to take a step back at the same time. Otherwise, they would start fighting when they met. As for allying with the sea monarch, she had obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it. Once the alliance was complete, he would have to send out his troops. He couldn't possibly tell the Ocean Emperor that he was just teasing him and that he should just go back to where he came from. If that happened, the Ocean Emperor would have to attack Hera first before using the underworld. Not long after, she thought of a new question. Can you find Poseidon? I only know a general location, but I remember that he was very close to the Atlanteans. Of course, Thea knew about this. Otherwise, she would not have come up with this idea. Don't worry, I'm also friends with the Atlanteans. Poseidon had always been a god worshipped by the Atlanteans. It was said that he lived in the deepest part of the sea. Thea felt that it would not be difficult to find this god with the help of the sea monarch couple. As for how to persuade him after that, it could only be said to be improvisation. There was a 70% chance that she would use her fist. The nature of this world was that there was no need to show off. Whoever had the bigger fist would have the right to speak. The strength of the sea monarch was far inferior to Zeus. In Thea's opinion, he was most likely at the same level as the firstborn. Against an enemy of this level, she did not think that she would lose if she went all out. She even wanted to take a look at the sea monarch's treasury. What if there was a treasure like the thread of fate? Since you are so proactive. All right, I agree. Hera thought about it and finally made up her mind. Thea was really speechless. Hera was good at scheming, but when it came to serious matters, she was hesitant. Hera's personality flaw was too big. Also, you must conscript Apollo to join the battle. Also, order the two gods who escaped to come back. If they don't come back, they will be expelled. Thea was still a little afraid of Apollo. How could he just stand aside and watch? Forcing him to join the battle? The sun god naturally had some characteristics of light. Anyone could surrender to Hades, but not him, unless he wanted to become a dead sun. Hera was actually very dissatisfied with Apollo. He was the only god who did not come, but Hera did not have many ways to keep him in check. I'll call Kara Danvers. You can take her to threaten Apollo. Thea also knew that Hera was not the god king. If Zeus was still the god king, no one would dare to provoke him. How dare you not come when the god king summons you? Do you still want to live? In the end, what determined everything was still strength. Thea's plan was to gather all the gods to fight Hades and completely defeat him. Of course, if she could also plunder his treasury, Thea would not mind. Accepting Hercules, allying with Poseidon, and forcing Apollo. If all three of her suggestions could be realized, it would not be difficult to force Hades to sign the oath. After all, what determined the world was still the high-end power. Thea even wanted to use the Flash to deal with Hermes, but it was not the time to mention it. After making up her mind, Hera made a prompt decision and went to Earth with Thea's incarnation to find Supergirl. The Martian hunter was now focused on teaching his niece, so he did not have time to pay attention to Supergirl. Apollo had hidden himself very well. However, under the authority of the Divine King, even if he was a fake Divine King, he had nowhere to hide. He had used this tactic several times. It did not matter whether it was old or not, as long as it was effective. Hera's trip was not dangerous. She only had one goal, which was to beat Apollo to the ground until he was convinced. Diana went to find Hercules, which was also not dangerous. At most, she could persuade Hercules to give up his grudge with Hera, but it would take a lot of talking. Thea's task was the most important. She had to persuade Poseidon to join the battle. Without his army as cannon fodder, the gods would be in trouble. However, the premise of persuading him was to find the location. Heros' authority did not have jurisdiction over Pluto and Poseidon. This was the agreement between the three brothers. They did not belong to Mount Olympus. Hera only knew the approximate location, so Thea had to find it herself. Time was tight and the task was important. They split up. Thea left Mount Olympus and went to find the Neptune couple. She remembered that there were records of Atlantis, and they might even have some contact. Poseidon, the Neptune, who was spending time with Malar, was surprised by Thea's visit. He was especially surprised by the name she mentioned. Wasn't that a character from myths and legends? Chapter 6:11. You don't know? Thea was dumbfounded. Was there a problem with her plan from the beginning? You don't know? Mia asked at the same time. She looked at her husband in shock as well. What do I know? The Sea King, Arthur Curry, was dumbfounded by their questions. He was making oatmeal and quickly turned off the gas. With his sharp mind, he realized something. Thea was confused by the couple's questions and answers. Seeing the slight change in Mia's expression, she signaled for her to speak first. Poseidon has always been a god worshipped by Atlantis. Didn't the Elder Council mention it to you? The Sea King shook his head, indicating that he did not know. He had a strange expression. No one has ever mentioned it to me. I thought you knew. Mia was a little speechless. She felt that she was being ignorant. At the same time, she was also a little annoyed. She should help her husband with his studies. He had lived in human society all his life and knew too little about many of the customs of Atlantis. Sia coughed softly when she saw the young couple's lovey-dovey look. Unlike a simple young couple, she felt a strong sense of rejection and conspiracy from it. She didn't need to think to know that it was the Elders' Council behind this. She was a political figure now, but she still didn't like politics. Unfortunately, she couldn't escape the influence of politics because she was in the middle of it. Even the evil Lord Darkseid, despite being so powerful, still had to make some compromises with politics and split up the power in his hands. For example, he let the Wasteland Wolf lead his army, and Desard managed all the affairs on the Apocalypse Star. Darkseid could kill these people instantly, but if he wanted them to work for him, he had to make some concessions. This had nothing to do with strength, but a deeper problem of order. The Elder Council that the Sea King was talking about was the product of a few parties' coordination. However, she did not want to be involved in other people's affairs. She had enough problems. She just wanted to find the Sea King's hiding place. Understanding her intentions, the Sea King was very happy. Let's go. You haven't been to Atlantis, right? I'll ask the council. Besides, there should be records in our library. Thea immediately followed them. To be honest, she had admired Atlantis for a long time. The couple jumped into the water. Thea, who was already a god, did not need any water armor. She could follow the couple with her own divine power. The three of them dove all the way down and passed through several huge underwater caves. Thea followed them as they flew through the sea. Thea followed them with her divine power. 10 minutes later, they had entered the deep sea. This was a forbidden area for humans. Perhaps only the most advanced underwater detectors could observe this place. Many nameless deep-sea fishes caught sight of the three of them. Some of them chose to avoid them, while others pounced on them fearlessly. Unfortunately, they were all controlled by the Sea King's ability to control marine creatures, so they turned around and went home. How did your body survive in the deep sea? Miaula was very curious as to how Thea could keep following them. She wanted to use her ability to control water to help her, but seeing how relaxed Thea was, there was no need to do so. Sia could only laugh and change the topic. She bragged that she was some kind of god, and that she could come and go as she pleased in this small pool of yours. She was not thick-skinned enough. At first, they were worried that Thea would not be able to withstand the huge water pressure. Seeing that she was observing the strange environment around her as if nothing was wrong, they stopped worrying and used all their strength to swim to the deepest part of the sea. There was no sound in the depths of the sea. It was pitch black from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, and her sense of direction was completely confused. Her well-known phobia of the deep sea was not just for show. Fortunately, her eyesight had been following the Sea King, so she did not lose him. After passing through a few trenches that had yet to be explored by human beings, the three of them entered a cave that was invisible to the naked eye at the northwest corner of the trench. They found themselves in a rugged and winding tunnel. Between the walls of the tunnel, there were some aquatic plants that were emitting fluorescent light. The tunnel was several hundred miles long. The three of them passed through the cave without making any sound. In the deep sea stood a magnificent and vast city, Atlantis. This city that had sunk into the deep sea still retained its former beauty. The blue stone pillars still emitted light even in the deep sea. Many tall and artistic buildings dotted the city like stars in the sky. The layout of the city was like two concentric circles, divided into the inner ring and the outer ring. With just a rough look, Thea could see the power structure here. The nobles lived in the inner ring of the city center, while the commoners lived in the outer ring. This was not only convenient for the expansion of the city, but also to use the lives of the commoners to buy time for the nobles to escape when the enemy attacked. Yes, Thea did not have a good impression of this group of people. Because when she was looking around, an old man with a few guards was arguing with the Sea King. And from the way the old man pointed at Thea from time to time, she knew that he was not saying anything good. Language barrier. Atlantis naturally could not speak English. Some of the words were similar to Greek, but the specific meaning was not easy to distinguish. Thea cast a small spell, language proficiency. This spell allowed her to understand the language of all intelligent creatures. As for the dragon language and demon language, it was not within the range of the spell. This person from the surface must be questioned by the Parliament. Arthur, let me remind you, even if your mother let you ascend the throne, you still have to obey the orders of the Parliament. The old man pointed his finger at the Sea King's nose fiercely. She is my friend. Stay away from her. This is for your own good. The Sea King and Sia had dealt with each other a few times, so he had a good understanding of her character. She was a docile donkey. It was fine if you didn't provoke her, but if you did, you would have to prepare for your funeral. Her mother is one of the leaders of the people on the surface. I warn you, Councillor Coate, if you do not want to cause a dispute, ask your guards to return to their posts. The Sea King spent 3 days a week at the bottom of the sea and the remaining 4 days on land. He was also a person who had social activities. The huge commotion caused by Moira's election was known by all the Aborigines of the South Pacific Ocean. Naturally, the couple saw the news, especially when they knew this person's daughter. The old man named Coate was stunned. To deal with such political figures, he had to use political means. When he heard that Thea had a background, he hesitated. Thea pretended not to understand their conversation and asked Malar in English, "Is this guy your enemy? He looks disgusting. Do you need me to make him disappear?" In fact, she was hoping that Malar would nod her head. Then, she could use the eye of obliteration to make him disappear. It was too complicated to deal with gods, but it was effective against an ordinary person. Malar was shocked and hurriedly pulled her back. She gently waved her hand and pointed at the Sea King with her chin, indicating that her husband could solve this problem. Chapter 6:12. After learning about the special relationship between Thea and Diana, Malar became much friendlier towards the two girls. In her simple and honest view, as long as they did not steal her husband's woman, they were all good women. The old man's eyes flickered as he weighed the pros and cons. In the end, he gave up and a possible face-slapping scenario disappeared without a trace. Thea sneered. The Sea King couple probably did not know that the underwater world and the land were not as isolated as they thought. She, who had recently taken control of the underground world, knew that there was always a secret channel between the two sides. The only thing that could make both sides sit down and talk about benefits. The seabed was rich in pearls and items from sunken ships. These things could be sold at sky-high prices on the surface. Similarly, the surface world had a wide variety of medicines and chemical products, which were very popular among the underwater nobles. It was true that the seabed was vast. Unfortunately, there were many things that could not be found underwater, so they could only seek help from the land. Both sides took what they needed. Thea even knew that her medical cabin had been smuggled here, which showed how frequent the interactions between the two sides were. No one knew when this secret channel was built. The people in charge of this channel had changed countless times. Some people worked for their entire lives and still did not know that the people they were dealing with were the legendary Atlanteans. After chasing away the annoying flies, the Sea King couple led Thea to the city center. As you can see, their attitude towards me is definitely not friendly. Let's ask my mother directly. She definitely knows the whereabouts of Poseidon. Your mother? Thea was a little surprised. Of course, it was not because the Sea King had a mother. Other than those who jumped out from the cracks of rocks, most people had a mother. This was normal. Thea was curious why his mother was still alive. Feeling that the development of things here was a little different from what she remembered, Thea decided to listen more and see less. The three of them entered the city through the main gate. Along the way, the civilians looked at Thea with surprise. She naturally did not wear a hood when visiting other people's cities. At first, she thought that the civilians were admiring her appearance. Then, she realized that something was wrong. The admiration was still there. More of the civilians were shocked that a person from the surface could appear here so openly. How can they tell that I'm a mainlander? Is there such a big difference between me and you? Thea did not understand. She felt that she was no different from the Sea King and the others. Could it be that there were only so many people in Atlantis, and everyone knew each other? Haha. The Sea King laughed heartily. To you, it's an extremely small area. We have gills, but you don't. The Sea King pointed at his own neck as he spoke. Thea took a closer look and realized that there were indeed tiny air holes on both sides of his neck. However, the Sea King's hair was exuberant, so they were well hidden. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to tell. After this brief interlude, Thea calmly accepted everyone's gazes and followed them into the inner circle of the noble district as if nothing had happened. My mother passed the trident and the throne to me. She has now retreated behind the scenes. She is very kind and wise. She must know the answer to your question. Along the way, the Sea King would occasionally introduce the current situation of the city. When he talked about his mother, his words were filled with pride. It was another old woman. This was the only thought that appeared in Thea's mind. There were many more old women in this world than expected, and they were all political figures. Her own Moira, Diana's biological mother Hippolyte, the Sea King's mother, Luther's mother. In the Sea King's impression of his mother, she was kind and considerate. Without looking, Thea knew that it was all an act because her own mother was the same. The three of them did not go to the palace. Instead, they went to a small courtyard not far from the palace. According to the Sea King, after he inherited the throne, his mother was still close to guide him. When they stepped into the courtyard, a person rushed out in a hurry. The person had black hair and a black vest. His gaze swept across the Sea King and the others, pausing for a moment on Thea's face for some reason. After that, he left without looking back. That bastard Emu doesn't respect Arthur at all, Malar said indignantly. The Sea King did not have much prejudice against this half-brother of his. In fact, he even fantasized about being respectful to his younger brother. When the three of them walked into the house, they were all stunned by the scene in front of them. A mature woman was lying in a pool of blood. There was a sharp blade in her back that pierced through her chest. Mother! The Sea King roared. Malar was stunned and hurriedly went to check the wound. Thea rolled her eyes speechlessly. In an instant, she thought of many things. Conspiracy, conspiracy, and conspiracy. Unlike the two naive children of the Sea King, she thought deeper and further. However, all the explanations could only be verified after the fact. The most important thing now was to save the mother. I'll save her. Thea asked Malar to stand aside. This girl had no experience in treating people. The Sea King's mother was about to die. How could she use water to freeze the wound? External injuries could be treated in this way. However, in this situation, the more her body temperature was lost, the faster she would die. She raised her hand and used 3 healing spells on the mother to keep her alive. Thea immediately took out her special medical cabin. Magic was not omnipotent. For fatal wounds like this, some surgical methods were more effective than magic. Thea scanned the woman's organs with her supervision. They were similar to those of modern earthlings. However, she did not dare to be careless. Coincidentally, there were many books in the study of the Sea King's mother. She found a medical book and started reading. With the help of the time acceleration enchantment, she finished reading all the medical books in Atlantis in just 30 seconds. Next, she started to work. She built an extracorporeal circulation system, cleaned the wound, and used magic to promote the self-growth of the cells. There's a poison in your mother's body that's resisting my magic. I need some time to study this poison. It's best that we go to the surface to treat her. Thea's treatment was extremely fast. Sometimes, she felt that she was about to become the god of medicine. We have all kinds of equipment in Atlantis. Why don't we treat her here? The Sea King was a little puzzled. He was relatively naive and did not smell the thick smell of conspiracy in the air. Thea smiled bitterly. If I'm not wrong, Atlantis will soon not belong to you, but to them. Huh. The couple did not understand such a strange sentence. Fortunately, someone revealed the answer for him. He, who had been paying attention to his mother, finally realized something. There was a hubbub of voices outside the courtyard. Many voices were inadvertently heard. That person from the surface killed the queen. We must avenge the queen. Arthur is also an accomplice. They were all bewitched by the people from the surface. Let Sir Amu lead us to avenge the people from the surface. The sudden turn of the situation stunned the Sea King couple. They did not know how things turned out this way. The old man who blocked the way before did not seem to be afraid of my political identity. Instead, he used it. They want to start a war. Thea was speechless as she revealed the answer. Chapter 613. Seeing that the Sea King and his wife were still in a daze, she continued her analysis. I don't know if the real mastermind is your good brother, but to be able to come up with such a plan in such a short time, this person is very good at planning. First, she got rid of your greatest support, your mother, and then framed me. This was a very ingenious plan. Not only did she deprive you of your throne, but she also used my identity to turn the ordinary people's love for the queen into hatred for the people on the surface. Do you understand now? Thea finished and looked outside again. The ice wall made by Malar would not be able to hold them off for long. Moreover, the enemy had already assembled the advance troops. It could be said that this plan was not made in a day or two. I don't believe that Amu would do such a thing. He must have been bewitched. It's all those elders doing. The Sea King didn't believe that his relatively honest younger brother would do such a thing. Thea could only remain silent. She did not want to get involved in other people's family matters. Originally, she only wanted to ask for the address of the Sea King and then retreat. Now that the situation was escalating, these people actually wanted to launch a land attack. Were they too free? Wealth from war was indeed good, but the current Earth had to preserve every bit of vitality in order to face future enemies. Not only the people on land, but the Atlanteans at the bottom of the sea were also part of the Earth. Every sacrifice would be a great loss. Unfortunately, she was compassionate for the sake of the big picture, but some people treated her as a pushover. It's that woman. Kill her and avenge the queen, someone in the crowd said. Judging from the voice, it was the counselor who blocked the way. Many of the civilians were bewitched. The mastermind knew these people's personalities very well. He chose those who were usually very impulsive. Seeing that they were holding all kinds of spears and sticks, Thea put on her hood again. She was afraid that her sneer would be seen. At the same time, she accumulated magic in her body. Even if she did not kill them, she should teach them an unforgettable lesson. Stop, all of you stop. Sea King Arthur waved his trident in front of her. In the past, the crowd would show a certain degree of respect when facing the trident, But today the queen was lying in a pool of blood, which made them burn with anger. Arthur, remember that you are our king, not some surface person. Hand over the woman behind you, and we will still respect you. The elder council will judge her fairly. A bunch of people were talking at once. Malar had been comforting Thea, afraid that she would go on a killing spree and cause a bloodbath. Listen to my explanation. Thea is not the murderer. She entered the courtyard with us. The real murderer is. He hesitated at the end. The crowd was in an uproar. It could be seen that the Sea King still had a certain amount of prestige, so they tried to give him a chance to explain himself. It's OM. We saw OM hurrying out of the room. The Sea King painfully told the truth. He thought that the crowd would calm down, but he had underestimated Amu's reputation in Atlantis. He had also overestimated the credibility of his words. He lied. OM is not that kind of person. Arthur, you traitor of Atlantis, how dare you frame your brother who has always respected you? The crowd finally exploded. Compared to Arthur, who had only been here for a few years, they trusted OM, who grew up in Atlantis, more. One grew up on the surface, and the other grew up beside them. Who would they trust? Subjectively, they believed and agreed with OM, which naturally caused them to be disgusted with Arthur. Perhaps OM was the most suitable king of Atlantis. This thought instantly appeared in everyone's mind. Thea was speechless when she saw this scene. The other party had accurately grasped Arthur's mentality and made him cut off all ties with his people. As long as he protected Thea, he would automatically give up the throne. If he did not protect her, a war against the surface would break out at any time. The situation took a turn for the worse. The angry civilians no longer had any concerns. They grabbed their weapons and rushed towards the three of them. The Sea King kept shouting, telling them to stop and listen to him. Unfortunately, these people thought that they had found the truth. The chaotic roars drowned out his explanation. What should they do? A serious problem appeared in the minds of the three of them. Thea did not have any scruples. She wanted to use her strength to defeat these ignorant civilians and then reveal the real culprit. With her supervision, she saw a large number of soldiers walking out of the barracks and starting to gather. Their target was this small courtyard. Atlantis lacked a lot of medicine. This was not because of their lack of technology, but because they lacked some necessary materials. Their technology was very advanced, and they were all equipped with energy weapons. Thea did not know how big their army was, but as far as she could see, there were tens of thousands of soldiers with advanced weapons marching towards this place. Unfortunately, she looked at the unconscious former queen. If she was not poisoned and unconscious, she could easily suppress the rebellion with her prestige. Now, she could only choose to avoid it. Arthur, the enemy's army is very close. Let's save your mother first. Thea stopped the Sea King, who was still arguing with the civilians. If they did not leave now, when would they? Tens of thousands of people against her, it would be very difficult if they could not kill her. If the Atlanteans had some advanced technology, it would be awkward. The Sea King and his wife knew that she had the ability to teleport. After thinking about it, they could only choose to retreat. The real intention of the mastermind was to force them to leave. The army gathering was more like a signal. The Sea King needed time to save his mother, and they also needed time to reorganize their army and go to the surface. As long as the flames of war were ignited, racial hatred would form. Even if the queen appeared again, it would not be so easy to resolve. Both sides were racing against time. Now, it was up to Thea to save the queen and return to Atlantis first, or their army to the surface first. Mira controlled the seawater to disperse the civilians. Thea brought them directly back to the metropolis. She had a large number of instruments in her laboratory that could detect toxins. In order to speed up, she also called Poison Ivy to help with the examination. Modern technology checked again and again, but in the end, they could not analyze what kind of poison it was. Thea suspected that it was a secret recipe of the palace, or a toxin refined from some substances that were extinct on Earth. However, her magic did have a miraculous effect. She used a large amount of magic to wash away the toxins. In addition, Poison ivy also created a plant medicine that neutralized part of the toxins. After an hour of hard work, the queen finally woke up slowly. She looked around for a long time. She did not recognize the environment in front of her. Unlike ordinary Atlanteans, she had lived on the surface before, and it was during that time that she met the Sea King's father. The oxygen content in the air told her that this was the surface. But how did she come here? Chapter 6:14. Thea left some space for the mother and son to talk. She walked out of the room and browsed through the information that Gideon had collected. While they were treating the injured, the other party was not slow either. The large number of troops could not be gathered in a short period of time. However, they were ruthless enough to send out a small team of about 100 people to attack the surface. These people were kamikazes. Their purpose was to sacrifice their lives and start a war between the two sides. When they first saw their battleships coming out of the sea, many citizens took pictures, thinking that it was a game show. It was only when the Atlantean soldiers walked out of the battleships and prepared to shoot at the crowd that they realized the danger they were in. Fortunately, or rather, unluckily for these people, they chose Gotham as their first stop. The simple-minded citizens of Gotham City had never seen plasma weapons before. However, when they saw these people in strange outfits and assumed shooting positions, they all chose to evade out of reflex. As a member of the Gotham family, even the normal citizens had a bonus to their dodge. For example, Master Bat could dodge bullets with a light jump and dodge Omega Ray with a heavy jump. This was an external sign that their dodge attributes were stacked to the max. The kamikazes fired for a long time, but they were dumbfounded to find that no one was killed. Only a few were injured. Were the people on the surface so fierce? A shadow appeared in the hearts of the kamikazes. Of course, they were not tired of living and wanted to die. Instead, they had noble morals. At least from their point of view, they were very noble. When the small team set off, the Elder Council advocated that they would take down America in 3 days and conquer the world in a month, returning Earth to the embrace of Atlantis. Looking at it now, this goal seemed to be a little difficult. Before they could walk out of the ominous situation, a large cloud was flying towards them. This could be called a nightmare for them for a long time in the future. As a person who only slept for an hour a day, Batman saw an unfamiliar force enter his city and open fire without saying anything. He immediately rushed to the scene in the Batfighter. He met up with Batgirl and Third Robin, and the three of them beat up more than 100 people. They did not die, but severe injuries were unavoidable. Thea was secretly glad when she saw this. Batman's principle of not killing was sometimes troublesome, but sometimes it was useful. Arthur, a small team from Atlantis, landed 10 minutes ago and was wiped out. She hurriedly told the Sea King's family the good news. The Sea King was a little dumbfounded. On the one hand, he was surprised by the opponent's speed. On the other hand, he shared the same thoughts as the more than 100 of his injured clansmen. Were the people on the ground really that fierce? No one died. You probably know that it was Batman who stopped them. Thea thought to herself. Not only did she stop their evil deeds, but these people would probably have to spend the rest of their lives in wheelchairs, if there were wheelchairs at the bottom of the sea. I have to make a trip to Batman's side. His troops will continue to emerge. Humans must be prepared. Thea was speechless. Coordinating the cooperation between superheroes and the government was undoubtedly her mission. It would take time to resist the enemy's army, time for the Sea King's mother to recover, and time for them to return to Atlantis and set things right. Many troops were already on their way to the surface. Even if the order was changed at the last minute, there would be those who refused to obey the order. Thea could only coordinate and build the humans' defense line first. If a few casualties were unavoidable in this war, it would have to be the Atlanteans. She checked the Queen's injuries again. Her physique was also very strong. It was just that the residual poison had suppressed the speed of her recovery. Optimistically, it would take more than half a day for her to recover to the point where she could seize power. This was not a game. Even if her HP was full, she would not be able to recover. There was an upper limit to healing skills. The growth of cells could not be too fast. This was determined by objective laws. The Sea King couple also had mobile phones. Thea told them to keep in touch while she teleported to Gotham. She had lost count of how many times she had been to the Batcave, but she still did not like the dark environment here. What made her even more curious was that no matter when she came to the Batcave, Master Bat would always be dressed the same way. Who was he showing off to when he was at home with a hood? Look at him wearing Kevlar all day long. It would take him a lot of effort to go to the toilet. Batman was used to Miss Thea coming and going as she pleased. He was studying the energy weapons of the Atlanteans. He glanced at Thea from the corner of his eyes. Is the enemy this time related to you? Thea cried out that she had been wronged. She explained everything from the beginning to the end. Just by looking at Batman's eyes, she knew that her explanation was feeble. The Atlanteans. Batman had also investigated the Sea King. He even had a set of Black Manta ray tights. He was not completely ignorant of this underwater country. Anyway, this is what happened. These guys. Thea looked at the men of sacrifice who were knocked out by Batman with a strong anesthetic. These guys will have to be returned later. Don't go overboard. Thea's words were to leave the rest to fate. Batman would not give up on the research materials at hand. With his personality, he would definitely test the Atlanteans' various numerical values. How much heat they could withstand, how much pressure they could withstand, how long they could survive in a vacuum environment, and lastly, their magnetic field and resonance frequency. After leaving the Batcave, they went to the Kansas farm. Superman was at home accompanying his wife who was about to give birth. After hearing Thea's description of the current situation, Superman immediately said that there was no problem. He would not hurt the Earthlings and could not kill the Atlanteans. He had no pressure in doing this. After that, Thea greeted the various superheroes and leaders of various countries. 3 motherships, 10 giant mechs, and 80 small mechs were all ready for battle. The vanguard of the Atlanteans had already set off from the deep sea. 2 submarines cruising in the Atlantic Ocean were attacked by them. Fortunately, Superman arrived in time and saved the submarines. The dark clouds of war shrouded the entire world without the knowledge of ordinary citizens. Rio de Janeiro, the coast of Florida, Caracas. We have seen the enemy landing. The frontline troops have all assembled. The mech troops are ready. A lot of intelligence gathered at the Pentagon. General Swanwick had a bitter face as he deployed the defense. He was originally a black man, but now his face was even darker. Mr. President was too lazy to do anything to save his reputation. When he heard that the Atlanteans were invading, he did not ask about the details at all. He hid in the basement without saying anything and pushed everything to the Department of Defense. In a private call to the minister, Mr. President very happily delegated power, and said that even if he was defeated, if he wanted to sign the surrender agreement, he could sign his name. He didn't care about the pillar of shame in history at all. There was only one condition, and that was to not disturb him. It was just an empty reputation. He had long put it aside. Chapter 6:15. Mr. President had given up on himself and was unfazed. General Swanwick could not do the same. He felt that he could still be saved as the Minister of Defense. If this was a normal era, his military power could crush the US military of all eras. Unfortunately, the current era was not normal. When Thea learned that he was leading the army, she even took the time to help spread the past of Atlantis. These words sounded like sleep talk to him. Atlanteans? You must be kidding me. However, the images captured by the satellite told him that Thea was telling the truth. This made the African minister, who had always had a firm view of the world, feel helpless. Please rest assured, Mr. Minister. The superheroes will help to resist. I don't ask the frontline soldiers to not kill anyone. That would be making things difficult for them. However, we can't take the initiative to provoke them. This is just a conspiracy of a small group of people. There is still a chance to salvage the situation. Thea nagged at the generals to reason with them. If they were obedient, it would be fine. If they were disobedient, they would use their divine power to confuse them. She was doing this for the sake of everyone's peace. She did not feel burdened at all. Thea worked non-stop to coordinate the relationship between all parties. Superman was in charge of the sky, the Flash was in charge of the ground, and the remaining heroes were in position to prepare for the enemy's first wave of attack. The Sea King's mother was called Atlana. It was a very beautiful name. After treatment, she had regained some ability to walk. After understanding what had happened, she also did not want a war between the ground and the sea. Regardless of her weak body, she insisted on stopping the war. This was completely in line with Thea's plan. She did not have time to ask about Poseidon. She teleported again and brought Atlana and the Sea King couple to the landing point of the Atlanteans to stop their actions. The first 2 landing points were considered successful. Neither the generals nor the soldiers expected the respected queen to still be alive. They were here for revenge. This made them feel dissatisfied that they were fooled by the Elder Council. The 2 dangerous situations were eliminated. The generals on both sides were ordered not to fire. Unfortunately, they encountered a huge obstacle at the 3rd landing point. The Sea Lord Amu, who was wearing a fish-scale armor and holding a magic halberd, walked out with a crowd. When he saw that his biological mother was still alive, he pointed at Atlana and said loudly to his subordinates, "This woman is not my mother. This woman is not my mother at all. She was transformed by that surface witch." He was the one who had called a deer a horse, but there were still people who believed him. There were 3 old men behind him. From Thea's point of view, their clothes were absolutely gorgeous. The 3 of them didn't wait for Amu's words to finish before they immediately voiced their support. This person said, "That's right. The queen can't be so weak. It's as if a gust of wind could blow her away." The other one pointed at Thea. "It's all because of this surface witch's disguise. The queen's corpse is still in Atlantis, waiting for you to avenge her." If Amu's words were a little tough on the outside but weak on the inside, the acting skills of these old guys could be said to have reached perfection. They used Atlana's weak body and Thea's teleportation to make an issue out of it and cleverly linked the 2 together. Their purpose was to refuse to admit that what was true was false even if it was true. The soldiers below were completely confused. In general, the idea of attacking the surface people had a certain market among the Atlanteans. However, most people opposed it. Their physiological structure had completely changed, and they could not live on land at all. After killing all the surface people, they would have to retreat to the sea. This kind of war was completely meaningless to the soldiers below, except for the satisfaction of conquering the surface people. "Kill that witch and we can break all the magic," one of the old men pointed at Thea and ordered. The people on Earth had satellites, and the Atlanteans also had similar monitoring methods. Thea had been teleporting around the world for a few hours, so it was not difficult to find her. In their view, once this Earthling died, the conflict between the 2 sides would become obvious. On the other hand, they were also annoyed by this kind of teleportation that came and went without a trace. Most of the soldiers did not follow blindly. They could still feel the smell of a conspiracy. However, there were always a few simple-minded weirdos who, upon hearing the order, opened fire on Thea without thinking. In order to help resolve the conflict between the 2 sides, she had spent the past few hours trying to persuade them. Now, the other party treated her as a soft persimmon, which completely angered the goddess of trade and wealth. The rolling divine power was no longer suppressed, and all of it surged to the other side. An invisible force that everyone could feel swept across the Atlanteans. Next, she saw the black technology of the Atlanteans. They had activated some kind of force field device, and a sky-blue energy wall shrouded them. Thea was a little surprised because she found that this device was operated by water. The other party's water controllers, the people of Mia, were constantly pouring seawater into the device to maintain the energy shield. The few old men who were scared *** less before became complacent again when they saw that their safety was guaranteed. One of them even gave Sia a provocative look, as if to say, "Aren't you awesome? I'm standing right here. What can you do to me?" Thea's temper also rose. The brainwashing of the firstborn was disrupted and came out to find trouble. These days, it had not been smooth sailing. Now, Even a nameless cameo dared to provoke her. She was ready to give these guys a hard time. The abundant divine power began to hit their shield like a giant hammer. The faces of several people operating the shield changed drastically. They directly turned a certain switch of the device to the maximum. At the same time, the water controllers were desperately pouring seawater into the shield to convert it into energy to resist the suppression of the divine power. It had to be said that their utilization of energy was much higher than that of the Earthlings. The energy contained in the seawater was almost 1-to-1 added to the shield. Seeing that the shield was constantly changing colors, from dark blue to light blue, the few old men looked at each other and did not look too good. They did not know what kind of invisible energy Thea was controlling. The scientists stayed in Atlantis and did not follow the army, but they knew that the other party must not have good intentions by hitting the shield so hard. The seawater was being consumed violently. The people were busy, but quantity was still not as good as quality. Relying on the black technology and the efforts of countless mortals, they could not stop the true god. Thea was confident that with 3 more hits, she could break the turtle shell. Just as she was about to break the shield in one go, a huge whirlpool appeared at the end of her sight. At the same time, a sharp and majestic divine power slowly rose from it. Damn it! She, who had always thought of herself as a lady, could not help but curse. What a coincidence! Thea stopped attacking and looked a little speechlessly into the distance. She laughed self-deprecatingly. This saved her a lot of trouble. She did not have to ask about the whereabouts of Poseidon because Poseidon had come to find her. Chapter 6:16. As the Atlanteans who had worshipped Poseidon for countless years, they sensed Poseidon's appearance only a little later than Thea. A few guys who looked like clerics were bowing in the distance. Poseidon did not show himself directly, but he sent out his voice. Why are mortals consuming so much seawater? Are you ignoring the majesty of the sea? Poseidon's voice was very dull, as if he was talking with a quilt. In Poseidon's opinion, it was most likely that the humans had nothing better to do, so they were reclaiming the sea. Every drop of seawater corresponded to his divine power, which was his capital to fight against Zeus and Hades. If they took advantage of his long sleep to reclaim the sea, he could not do anything. Now that he was awake, he naturally could not let the humans do as they pleased. Poseidon's body was still deep in the sea, maintaining a state of sleep. This time, it was only his avatar. He did not expect there to be a god on the surface, so he did not use any divine power to detect. Just like how Hades ignored Thea, Poseidon did not have the habit of casting detection spells on others anytime, anywhere. He did not know that there was a god at the scene who was about to reason with him. His original plan was very good. He was ready to leave after showing off. How could Thea let him run away? She used all her divine power and directly smashed the Atlanteans' protective shield. She was very tight on time and had no time to negotiate with them. In order to prevent them from attacking recklessly, she needed to make a symbolic deterrent. Her stern gaze swept across the Atlanteans, and finally found the magic halberd in Amy's hand. This ambitious but incompetent second prince was far less upright than his brother. He was somewhat evading Thea's gaze, but he instinctively held the halberd tightly. This is it. Thea opened her left hand, and under the influence of invisible waves, Amy's halberd flew into her palm. A magic halberd. She checked it for a while and sneered. What magic halberd? It smelled like a demon. Originally, she just wanted to throw it back to give him a deterrent, but the demon's participation changed her mind. Demons were enemies of order, and it was not wrong to kill one on sight. This halberd was not only made by a demon, but there was also a weak soul left in it. The soul was constantly devouring Amy's flesh and blood to restore its own state. Kid, you will thank me in the future. Thea gave Amy an enigmatic smile. She gripped the weapon with both hands and began to exert force. At the same time, her divine power entered the halberd. The demon inside was terrified to the extreme. The nameless demon did not know where this divine power came from, but it felt as if its body was being burned by flames. In the face of a disaster, it no longer hid. A shadow appeared above the halberd and tried several times to leave Thea's hand. At the same time, with the help of the soul connection, he began to absorb Emu's life force. The poor second-generation king screamed and fell to the ground. If it was a long, drawn-out battle, it would definitely cause irreversible damage to Emu. Unfortunately, there was an insurmountable gap between Thea and the nameless demon. This demon was similar to the one in Chatter Santana's body. Thea's divine power was like a millstone, and as soon as the two sides collided, the demon was crushed into fine powder. The demon was destroyed, and the halberd in Thea's hand was not much harder than chopsticks. With a crack, it broke into two. Your brother was bewitched by the demon. He needs some time to recover, Thea explained to the Sea King and Atlana. Previously, they had all seen the demon absorbing Emu's shadow. Knowing that the demon had confused the nature of his son, younger brother, the two of them heaved a sigh of relief. This made sense. Only a person controlled by the demon could do such a tragedy. As for the truth, it was up to them to deal with it. Emu was seriously injured. A few old guys were a little shocked by Thea and hurriedly carried Emu back for treatment. The humans had no intention of attacking. Thea asked them to wait for orders and make use of this time to deal with the Sea King. She followed the other party's divine power and dived down. Even if the other party was slow, he would still be able to see her. Which divine system are you from? The Sea Emperor's clone did not know what the other party's intentions were, but when he probed, he was given a fright. The other party's godly energy was abundant. Although there were subtle differences in the various types of godly energy, the one following them was a true god. The Sea Emperor's clone was certain of this. Strength was the basic platform for conversation. The Sea King's clone could not figure out the other party's intentions, so he spoke politely. Thea was also surprised. The sea always gave people the feeling of stormy waves, wild and unrestrained. She did not know if the other party was old or not confident enough. However, if people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. She knew how to play and pretend to be a lady. Your Majesty, I accept the request of the Herod Divine King to invite you to attack the underworld together. He. The other party's divine power turned into a human form. It was an elegant old man with a curly beard. The old man's tone was cold. My dear sister became the Divine King? How come she has such great authority now that she can order me around? Thea wanted to continue persuading, but the other party rolled up the seawater. Leave my sea. You are not welcome here. The turbulent seawater rolled back. Thea was not afraid of this clone. This clone looked scary, but it was not as strong as Diana. She just did not know the strength of this guy. If it was only at the level of a firstborn, she was not afraid. If it was very strong, she could only give up. With a cautious attitude, she avoided the seawater temporarily. This caused her to float thousands of miles away, and countless fish in the ocean were swept away along with her. The other party was very cunning. He was afraid that Thea would follow him, so he quickly fled to the south. The lady sneered softly. Herod had told her about the approximate location of the Sea King. It was definitely not the sea where the Sea King's clone was now. Moreover, the other party's attempt to hide made it more conspicuous. It seemed that he was afraid that she would follow. Thea had remembered the other party's divine power before. Now she took out the holy sword and amplified her perception to find the location of the Sea King's real body. The tentacles of her spiritual power were extended infinitely, and many fish became her eyes and ears. The surrounding hundreds of thousands of miles of sea territory appeared in her eyes. As she searched, a fish suddenly disappeared from her perception. Thea pursed her lips and smiled. It was here. The other party was hiding in a very exquisitely designed subspace. Like a sharp arrow, she dived quickly, and her target was the vanishing point. The divine power could not be hidden from others. The Sea King's clone thought that he could distract this big trouble, but he did not expect that Thea would still find out. He could only turn around to intercept again. Thea quickly realized that her speed underwater was far slower than the old man's. The old man's clone was not as strong as her, and he was far away from her, but he had reached the vanishing point first. When Thea got close, she found that the old man had stopped and was staring at her angrily. Chapter 617. What a coincidence. Thea greeted the old man cheerfully. At first, the old man's eyes were as big as copper bells. Then, he thought of something and his anger slowly subsided. Looking at the textbook changes in his facial expression, Thea wanted to take out her phone and create an emoji of him gradually stabilizing his expression. "What are you trying to do?" the old man said angrily. Unfortunately, Thea had already seen through his act of seduction. To put it nicely, these gods were willful, but to put it bluntly, they were unscrupulous. This kind of character also determined that they would not play tricks. Just like how Athena dealt with Aramani by turning people into spiders, they did such a heinous thing openly. They had no intention of hiding it. The only good thing about being unscrupulous was that they were used to being arrogant and rarely lied. Their acting skills were not up to standard. "I can't reason with you. I want to talk to your main body," Thea said fearlessly. At the same time, she was testing his bottom line. Bullsh *T. The Poseidon clone was so angry that he wanted to curse. The clone and the main body were naturally connected. He had never heard of the main body agreeing when the clone disagreed. Seeing Thea acting shamelessly, he really did not know what to say. After thinking for a while, he finally decided to take a small step back. "Okay, I won't argue with you about Heros God King. I know that Hades is preparing to attack Mount Olympus." The old man's words proved that he understood the development of the situation. "Don't try to fool me." Thea, on the other hand, saw something else. If this guy was content with the status quo, there was no need for him to spend so much effort to gather information. The human world had the internet, but the Greek gods didn't. Especially the Emperor of the Sea, Pluto, and Zeus, it could be said that they basically didn't have any contact with each other. Now, he knew that Hades was about to attack Mount Olympus. Either Hades had contacted him, or he had secretly observed it. She was not afraid of his concern. She was afraid that he did not care and had the intention to interfere. That would make it easier to make a fuss. Thea cleared her thoughts. "Your Majesty, Mount Olympus is now the weakest, you are in the middle, and Hades is the strongest. You don't deny this, do you?" The old man snorted proudly. "Mount Olympus has been breached, and the gods have fled to the human world. Who is Hades' next target? He can't suppress me. The human world is too small. The gods are his target, and the ocean is infinitely vast." The old man didn't take her words to heart at all. Thea snorted. "What vast ocean? Why don't you just say that you've found a place to hide and the other party won't be able to find you? After all, the ocean covers 70% of the Earth's surface. If this old man wants to run away, it will be really difficult to find him. All right, let's change our perspective. All the gods have been destroyed by Hades, and he has entered the kingdom of the dead. Every time a god dies, his power will increase. At that time, Hades will be the strongest in history. Will you tolerate a Hades whose divine power is infinitely increasing? Will he let you go?" Thea was taking things for granted. The gods were not fools. Even if they could not win, they could still run away. Like herself, if Earth was lost, there were countless planets she could take refuge in, not to mention that she had the support of a world like the new planet of creation. All the gods had their own means. Even Ars, who was now at his last breath, would not die so easily. However, the possibility of all the gods dying in battle still existed. No one could say for sure if the underworld had some means to prevent the gods from escaping. Of course, Poseidon didn't want to have a boss above his head. After all, the three brothers were equals before. Although Zeus was strong, he didn't wantonly invade their territory. If Hades became the boss, would he still tolerate Poseidon? This was a question mark. But even so, Poseidon still didn't want to send troops to participate in the battle. There was no benefit for him at all. He wanted to sit and watch the two sides fight to the death and then reap the benefits. This was his idea. Thea saw his expression change slightly and knew that her words had a little effect. Under the perception of her divine power, he seemed to care about benefits. What were benefits? Benefits were also within the scope of wealth. Even if there was a deviation, she could still perceive some of his true thoughts. Her Majesty Hera is preparing to gather the strength of the gods and attack the underworld in one go. Now, we just want to know Poseidon's position. Thea saw that the old man was pretending to be silent, so she threw another piece of shocking news at him. Just as he was thinking about when he should participate in the battle to maximize his benefits, he suddenly heard such earth-shattering words. The old man was a little confused. It took him a while to understand the meaning of Thea's words. You mean you want to attack the underworld? Aren't you going to defend? He only said that he wanted to attack you. He didn't even do anything, and you want to fight back. Do you have to be so hot-tempered? Of course, she would not say that it was her idea and push the blame to Hera. Sia pretended that she was just an idle person who was helping. She even shrugged her shoulders to express her helplessness and confusion. Then, she pulled her fingers and included all the gods who participated in the battle, including Apollo, who didn't cooperate, and the two who ran away. No matter what, the momentum has been built. We are 10 against 1, no matter how fierce Hades is, there should be a limit. These words made the Poseidon's balance tilt in favor of the gods. He didn't know Thea and Diana, but he knew his nephews and nieces very well. If Apollo and Hercules were present, just these two alone would be enough to make Hades suffer. In addition, Hera, who was originally only half a step behind the three brothers, was now the god King Hera. She could justifiably take out Zeus's top-grade divine equipment. After wearing it, her overall strength wouldn't be weaker than any of the main gods. The Poseidon thought to himself, "Hey, she's very strong." Thinking about Hera's strength, it wouldn't be a problem to take the initiative to attack. What should he do? What will I get if I participate in the battle? Peace in the divine world. Thea finished and looked at the old man's disdainful smile. And jurisdiction over the river Styx. Oh. Hera is willing to let me control the river Styx. Wrong, not Hera, but Hades. We are fighting for peace and forcing Hades to sign the peace agreement so that the divine world can have a smooth transition after the Zeus era. These words really moved the Poseidon. This is all Hera's idea. Her personality has changed a bit. One had to know that in Poseidon's eyes, Hera was a narrow-minded woman who fussed over small things every day. This was also the main reason why he disliked Hera as the god king. Now, he couldn't stand it anymore. Foresight was important. His sister and sister-in-law seemed to be showing signs of being reborn. Originally, Thea only wanted him to send troops to help in the battle. Now that he was a little moved, she thought that she might as well pull him over in person. The three of you are all pillars of the divine world. You've put aside your differences and are working together to overcome the current crisis. If you sign the peace agreement, it's best that you be present in person. Where is your original body now? Thea was still thinking about the Poseidon's treasury. Of course, she wanted to go in and take a look if she had the chance. Chapter 6:18. At the mention of the main body, the Sea King's avatar scratched his head. Now, he wanted benefits, but he did not want to expose himself. He was in a dilemma. Thea saw that he was silent and could only give up. There were still a lot of things to do in the outside world. Now that she had found the hiding place of the Sea King, she could come again next time. Immediately, the two of them finalized the dispatch of troops. Thea had completed her task. She hurriedly came out of the water to solve the problem outside. The Atlanteans had a total of 5 landing points. Thea and the rest stopped 3 of them. The Sea King used his swimming advantage to cross the ocean and forcibly stopped another landing point. In the end, a fight broke out at the last landing point. Atlanta controlled Amu and a few elders and sent an order to stop the fight at the last landing point. However, these guys were stubborn. They were determined to fight. The Atlantean soldiers were full of doubts, but they had to obey the orders of a few people in power. The buzzing of energy weapons began to sound. After receiving the signal of the other party to attack first, the Earthside also chose to fire. The Atlanteans felt that they could crush them. The human army, or the human higher-ups, also wanted to see if the real strength of this evil neighbor was as powerful as Thea said. The two sides seemed to have discussed it beforehand. There were almost no negotiations or other diplomatic means. They chose to fire directly. Both sides wanted to fight first and talk later. After being forced by Thea to climb the technology tree, the human weapons could be said to have a qualitative change from the original time and space. A giant mech carried a huge power and directly killed into the enemy's camp. There were also 10 small mechs as support. Laser weapons were not exclusive to the Atlanteans. The small elite human troops were also equipped with laser weapons. The giant mech entered unhindered. The Atlanteans also had mechanical weapons similar to tanks. Unfortunately, in front of the 1,000-ton mech, they were like toys and were sent flying everywhere. However, they had been planning for a long time. They were not without the ability to fight back. The deep-sea giant beast was their trump card. Giant beasts that were dozens of meters tall were summoned from the deep sea. These were all creatures from the ancient times. Because of their huge size, they could no longer survive on land. Some of them even struggled to survive in the deep sea. They were even modified by the Atlantean scientists into cyborg creatures. One of the sea monsters was almost translucent. It looked like a jellyfish that had been magnified hundreds of times. More than a dozen tentacles that were more than 100 meters long wrapped around the mech. A colorless and transparent gas spurted out from the end of the tentacles. The shell of the giant mech seemed to have been splashed with a layer of concentrated acid. The pilot hurriedly activated the energy shield to prevent the power core from being damaged. Another sea beast that looked like a nautilus crawled out of the sea with great difficulty. What looked like its head had a large bloody mouth with 3 layers of fine teeth. Together with 2 large pincers, it pounced toward the giant mecha with ferocious ferocity. The 2 giant beasts surrounded the giant mecha. The pilot of the mecha kept activating all kinds of shields and switching weapons. He fought with all his might, but he was still suppressed. Both sides fought until the surface of the sea was turbulent. A large number of mechanical parts and severed limbs of the sea beasts, as well as blood, splashed down like rain. It was the first time that humans had seen a monster of this size. To be honest, they were a little scared. They, including the political leaders of various countries who were watching the battle through the satellites, did not expect that such a prehistoric creature was still hidden on Earth. Human scientists had always suspected that there were giant sea beasts that were much larger than expected in the deep sea. They had also given various examples to prove it. After today, the teachers and students who studied paleontology were in luck. Because the existence of sea beasts had been confirmed, they would have countless research projects in the future. The humans were shocked. The Atlanteans were also intimidated by the combat power of the giant mecha. To some extent, such man-made creatures were even more terrifying than sea beasts. They knew that sea beasts were not Tom, Dick, and Harry. There were only a few of them in the deep sea. In order to reduce the consumption of their bodies, many of them chose to hibernate. Now, they could control less than 5 of them. Among them, 3 of them had undergone cyborg modification. For example, the Nautilus sea beast that was besieging the mecha was one of the more mechanized ones. That was why it had survived until today. They were too old, and their combat power had deteriorated greatly. Otherwise, 2 of them would not have failed to take down the giant mecha of the humans. The exchange of fire between the ground troops also made both sides frown. 10 small mechas acted as the main force, accompanied by a large group of human soldiers. They were not crushed in the face of the Atlanteans' technology. Both sides fought back and forth quite well. The humans were slightly at a disadvantage, and the battle situation was about 6-4. After not winning the first battle, the ordinary Atlanteans began to feel tired of the war. Half a day ago, they were still at home and were forcibly recruited to fight. It was fine if they could win, but the situation now was fundamentally different from what the elders had said before they set off, that the people on the ground would not be able to withstand a single blow. The humans were also a little annoyed that they had rashly opened fire. Their strength was still not enough. Originally, they thought that Dr. Thea had nothing to do after eating her fill. Now, it seemed that she had not taken big enough steps. The humans still had potential to continue to dig deeper. The Atlanteans did not know that they had unwittingly helped the eldest miss and suppressed the arrogance of the humans. They were still clenching their teeth and persevering. Conquering the continent by force seemed a little far-fetched now, but if they won the battle, they would get some benefits. At the same time, they would give their soldiers an explanation. The reason why their thinking changed so quickly was because of a guy in blue clothes and a red cape floating above the battlefield. The ordinary Atlanteans did not know which side this guy was on because no matter who was in danger, he would rescue them. The humans knew that this was Superman and naturally expressed their gratitude for being rescued. The Atlanteans also received the same treatment and thought that this big boss was on their side. In addition, there was a yellow lightning on the battlefield that came and went to rescue people. Similarly, it was a display of boundless love. The ordinary Atlanteans thought that it was quite fun, but the higher-ups were stunned. Were the people on the ground now so terrifying? The technology that they were proud of could not detect what the yellow lightning was at all. They could not even aim, so how could they fight? The Flash and the others could not aim, but Superman in the sky could. After some discussion, they decided to give this guy in the sky a shot to test his strength. In the end, the energy cannon that glowed with a blue light hit Superman's strong chest muscles. Brother Superman looked at them in confusion and did what he was supposed to do as if nothing had happened. Oh my God, is this guy even human? The few old Atlanteans looked at each other. Their current strongest weapon could not even break through this guy's skin. Although they did not learn Chinese, the few words that appeared in their minds were terrifying. When Thea arrived, the intensity of the exchange of fire between the two sides had decreased. Both sides were afraid of each other, especially when there was the deterrence of Superman in the sky and the Flash on the ground. The humans were easy to deal with. Thea directly called the Minister of Defense. If the leading general did not want to commit treason, he had to be obedient. The Atlanteans were a little more troublesome. When Thea teleported in, the few old men thought that she was here to kill them. Thea could only teleport the former Queen Atlana again. Only then did the two sides have a basis to talk. Whether the few old men were involved in the assassination of Atlana or whether the Queen would need to be punished after that was their family matter. She did not care. She only had one request, and that was to immediately cease fire. After being given a way out, the few old men reluctantly gave the order to cease fire. Both sides began to count their losses. Thanks to the two animals, Superman and the Flash, the battle lasted for more than 10 minutes. Many of the injured were moved to the distance by the Flash. They were lying on the ground, but no one on either side died. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.